That's right. Welcome to the Sunday show here on the line. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, the lovely and talented Ms. Arden Hart. How are you, my dear? Oh, you're muted. That's how you are.
Well, that does help. Is it really an online show if you don't start with an audio mistake? Yeah, no, I'm doing all right. I'm a little frazzled. Wasn't actually expecting to be here. I think all of you saw that Jimmy was supposed to be here until like this morning. We talked about it, and then we thought we might have had an alternate guest, but nobody else was available. So I'm here on last minute notice, but I'm ready.
That's right. Although Arden's producing, so I would imagine I will be doing the lion's share of some of the arguing, but nothing will stop Arden from doing whatever the hell she wants whenever she wants to do it, which is great.
Yes.
This is this very special day, honey, because I get it. This is the day when the world expresses their love for Taylor Swift. This is right. the day of the superb owl, I'm told. Although if you squish that together, it might be like Super Bowl, some superb owl, I think. Right. So here's the questions I have. This is the premiere show here on the Line Network. It's a Sunday show. I get it. People are going to be very busy today. We may or may not get any calls at all, but as always, theist calls are going to have priority. So if you believe in a god or something supernatural or otherwise and want to actually explain why you believe, and more importantly, why you think other people should potentially believe as well, that's why we're here. And theist callers will always have priority. But the questions that I have for today, since there is this big United States football competition, is it cheating to pray for God to help your team win? Because you know people are going to be out there doing it. And how would that not be cheating to have the all-powerful governor of the universe help your team to win? But if your team doesn't win, does that mean it's God's fault and you should blame God? Does it mean that God prefers the other team? So if you are one of those filthy 49ers fans, I will allow you to speak in chat. But if God chooses the Chiefs today, the question then becomes, why didn't you choose the Chiefs? If the Chiefs are God's chosen team in this endeavor, and you are rooting for the 49ers, how is that not just like rooting for Satan? How is that not just like, you might as well be advocating for anti-God. Why are you in disharmony with God? So I'm here to say, go Taylor's boyfriend, and welcome to the line. Monday, in addition to this program, there's a number of shows that air throughout the week. Monday will be Skeptalk, hosted by Aron Ra, returning from the Free Thought Cruise, and we'll probably have good information about all the stuff that happened down there, and maybe even some tips on what's happening for the 2026 cruise, which I already have heard about, but I don't think we'll be in attendance. But I'm excited in preparation for what may happen. And this Wednesday on the Hang Up, John Gleason will be joining me, and who knows what the hell we're going to talk about and what kind of calls we get. So, as always, lines are open. Arden, do you have other announcements or things we need to let people know about what's going on with the Line Network and you and TACIS and all that good stuff?
We're not going to do any calls on trans stuff today. Obviously we can't screen for people who are coming in to do their little baba booey, let me say something awful. But I'm not interested in taking trans calls today. This is an atheist show. We have an entire show dedicated to trans stuff. If you would like to talk about that, that is the place to call in. But otherwise, I don't really have too much to address. I know we were initially planning to launch a new show this Tuesday, and I think that's getting pushed back a week. So keep your eyes out for that. And then we're going to have N Boss coming at the first Saturday in March, which is the 2nd, I believe. So lots of good stuff coming. We've been views are up like crazy on the line. We started posting shorts, and that has been driving a lot of attention and engagement towards the channel, which is really exciting. Can mean we could have some really interesting calls, or we could have some really disastrous calls. But I'm buckled up. I'm excited to see how it goes.
Cool. Well, we are queuing up calls right now. We do have our first theistic caller. If I don't have any more announcements to do, let's get right into it. And that is Jared in Kentucky. Theist pronouns are he, him. Has a, I don't know, question, statement, argument, whatever about the necessity of God. So, Jared, welcome to the show.
Yeah, awesome. Glad to be back. I called once before with you. I think we had a short, brief discussion, but yeah, so I did want to talk about the necessity of God. I specifically am making the positive claim that I think that God is going to be necessary.
Okay. Which God?
The triune Christian God.
Okay. Go for it.
Yeah, so I just think I can just lay it out in like a modus ponens, or just give you a short syllogism. So it's just essentially like intelligibility exists if and only if God exists. Intelligibility does exist, therefore God exists.
So the first premise is intelligibility exists if and only if God exists.
Yeah.
Well, how are you defining intelligibility? And I guess just justify that first premise, because that's the whole thing.
Well, I mean, the justification for the first premise is essentially just going to be like the proof for it would be a proof by contradiction. So I think that if there's a negation of it, there would be at least one, conceptual entailment that would negate its modal accessibility, that being like a synthetic predicate, right?
Yeah, so what I'm asking is, let me try it again. How are you defining intelligibility, and how are you justifying that intelligibility exists if and only if God exists?
Well, by intelligibility, I just mean like in a state of being intelligible. Right? I mean, that's not that hard to understand, right?
Okay. I remember this call, Jared, and when I'm asking for clarification, it's because there are potentially tens of thousands of people that are going to watch this that may not understand things exactly the same way that you do. So if you're going to start with snarkiness, which you included snarkiness the last time we were having a conversation, including, I believe, asking me if I was having a stroke, this is not going to go well. So either, kind of rein in the snarkiness and have a legitimate conversation, or I'll just move on. When you say things like, it's not that hard to understand, I don't make assumptions about what people in the audience do and don't understand. So yes, intelligibility essentially could be described as if something is capable of making sense to an observer. That would be one potential definition of it. I was asking specifically about yours so that we can talk about yours and not a straw man or talk past each other.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be using it in like the colloquial sense, right? The ability to be understood or be comprehensible.
Sure. So what is the case for something that nothing could be comprehensible or comprehensibility or intelligibility exists if and only if the triune Christian God exists? I mean, what's the case for that?
Yeah, so again, it's going to be a proof by contradiction. So the negation of such would conceptually entail at least one set of a synthetic predicate, which would negate its modal accessibility, and thus have a conjunct of the truth value of the given proposition and its negation.
So are you going to make the case, or are you just going to tell me what the case would be and describe its characteristics?
Well, me saying would be is like a way of speaking. That was the case. The negation of such would be that.
So are you suggesting that intelligibility exists if and only if God exists should stand until somebody comes up with a defeater?
That's not at all what I said. I don't even know how you could possibly gain that being what I said.
Okay, so let me ask this again. What is your case for intelligibility only existing if a God exists?
Yeah. So by God, I just mean the atemporal, unconditional precondition is going to be necessarily non-contingent and universally ultimate.
No, sir. No, Jared, you don't get to say you're talking about the triune Christian God and then scale it down to an abstract God at the point of the argument. You can't have it both ways. So how do you demonstrate that the triune Christian God is required for intelligibility to exist?
Yeah, so I just went over this. So, like, these are going to be the attributes.
No, you didn't, Jared. We're going to try this one last time. And if you don't do it, then I'm just going to assume that you're a troll. So, what is the evidence to support your claim that intelligibility can only exist if the triune Christian God exists?
Sure. So the negation of such, and it's going to be proof by contradiction, the negation of such would conceptually entail at least one set of a synthetic predicate, which would negate its modal accessibility and have the conjunct of the truth value of the given proposition and its negation entailed. It's not that hard to understand, man.
Goodbye. Welcome to band, Jared.
What?
Jared,
what
you are so he's gone. I hung up.
No, I know. I don't understand what. Like, you could prove literally try to prove literally anything by that point, right? If your proof is a theoretical negation is the proof.
It's not just, see, this is why he's like, I don't know how you can say that, because I was trying to get to, is this, when you say it's a proof by contradiction, that essentially it would require that something of a particular type be found to exist, then you are essentially saying that your position stands until such time as there's a defeater for it. That's the whole purpose of an argument by contradiction, or a reductio ad absurdum, is to show that this position necessarily leads to absurdity, which means the other position is true. But simply saying that there needs to be some sort of something is not in any way evidence, nor is it an argument. So when you say that, well, my case for it would be, I've forgotten exactly the order of the terms he puts in there. That's not how this works. So you would need to actually show, not just state, that there is in fact a contradiction, a defeater, some sort of something. But if you're going to use first of all, a modal logic argument, you didn't say it's probably the case or it's necessarily the case in whatever world, etc. And there's a difference between metaphysical necessity and logical necessity. And so if you're only arguing for logical necessity, I don't care. I care about what actually exists. And so this notion that God is necessary for there to be intelligibility, I am not convinced. You have failed to convince me, and you have failed to put together an argument that the overwhelming majority of people could even begin to grok. So don't bother calling again, Jared. I've determined, based on the last two calls, with your smug superiority and throwing out as many terms as you can, instead of actually presenting evidence, that you are not a serious interlocutor. So on that note, we have no more calls, and the show is over.
Well, let's maybe banter for a little bit before we just terminate the show. I realize that it's Super Bowl Sunday, so it's going to be hard to get people in, especially because I think there's going to be a lot of people who probably don't care about football that might actually care today. Just for all the conspiracy theories that have been in the boiling pot around Taylor Swift and politics and endorsements of Joe Biden and all this crazy shit. So, yeah, I was not interested in participating in the call with Jared. I just edited the clip with him, 3 days ago. I can't deal with a person like that.
Yeah, so when you're talking about necessity, and this is part of often modological reasoning, to basically say that this could not be any other way. And the issue is, how do you determine that it couldn't be any other way? Now, if you have a reductio ad absurdum, so basically you're suggesting we assume as premise one, intelligibility exists without a God. And then you can show that this would lead to a contradiction. This is essentially what he was trying to describe, but was not actually presenting the case. Basically saying it would require this sort of demonstration. But simply saying you're going to make a reductio argument isn't making a reductio argument.
Even not being like in on all of the philosophy jargon. Like I've taken a number of philosophy courses in college, still don't retain all the jargon. I could understand what he was trying to do. It's just I'm interested in having conversations that are productive with people, not people who stoop to the smugness, the arrogance of, oh, well, shouldn't it be obvious what I'm trying to say here?
To understand.
Yeah,
you having a Jared is a smug. We went through this last time. There's no reason to take another call from him because Jared's not actually interested in having a conversation, and he's not interested in actually providing evidence for his beliefs. He just wants to present a philosophical argument that he finds particularly compelling without demonstrating why anybody else should find it compelling. It is I know this better than you do, better than your audience does, and let me this isn't that hard. Are you having a stroke? It's funny. The difference between people who may not have a good understanding of philosophical subjects and yet actually care about the truth and interest in education on it versus those who are like, let me see here. I understand this subject so much better than... Yes, enjoy your Logic 101 course. You've done really well.
Yeah. And for the record, too, to people who might be upset because, we are smug sometimes and arrogant towards callers who are difficult to clear the air. Generally, we have a principle of reserving that for when the caller has demonstrated that they aren't willing to engage honestly in the conversation. At that point, I start to engage them on their level like that. I don't start out the conversation that way, right? There's a very fundamental difference in the approach there. Somebody called him the illegitimate child of Darth Dawkins. Which is pretty funny.
It could be. One of the things is that when you say something, if you're just going to put together a sentence with no thought about whether or not people are able to, I couldn't even take notes to keep up with the rapid fire of the words, which is why I'm not going to get the words in the right order that reflects what he actually said. The thing is, it's an incredibly simple syllogism, and so that's not a problem. But when it comes to supporting the syllogism, the first premise being that intelligibility exists if and only if a God exists, that's the whole argument. That's the whole ball of wax. And if all you're going to be is essentially, well, duh, it's not hard to understand. It would need, this, you'd need and so that's why I asked about defeaters, but it's fine. We went from no calls to full lines. And so you ready?
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
Sweet. We're going to start with Mario in Texas. Pronouns are they, them, with a question or comment on the historicity of Jesus. Welcome, Mario.
Hey. Yeah, we've met a few times. I just heard that you...
hey, Mario.
There was no one on the line.
Before you go on...
Heard there was...
I'm sorry. Yep. I know you just started. I'm not trying to be an asshole here. Are you standing in front of a wind tunnel? Because we're getting a lot of loud blowing.
Yeah, I'm outside and it's windy.
If you could find a place where that isn't happening, that would be really preferable because it's really hard to understand you when all I'm hearing is whooshing in the background.
I'm 5 minutes from home. Did you want to put me back on?
Sure.
On hold.
Put you back in the queue. Right. We'll give to you in a little bit. Thanks. That's fine.
Yeah. Reminder for the audience: we don't take calls from people who are driving. If you are driving, don't call. It's dangerous. It's not good for the show. It's not good for your safety or the safety of the people around you. Just don't do it.
I think Mario was actually out for a walk or something, but either way, it's some audio stuff. All right. Mohammed in Algeria, welcome back to the show. Pronouns are he, him. How you doing?
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
We hear you fine.
Okay. So this question, and like I hope I can finish it, but like this question is a doozy, right? It's been with me a long time, and I can't really figure out what I'm getting wrong in my logic here. So my question is, like, if the spiritual doesn't exist, if we don't have spirits, if like our brains and beings and stuff are all in nature, right, which is all that is provable, then I would guess that the universe is deterministic, right? That everything that happens or has happened is like a direct consequence of the Big Bang. In other words, there is no free will, which is fine by me. Like I don't need free will to actually like live. That's fine, right? But if we assume that, that kind of takes away from the value of morality to me, because like you can imagine, if someone like kills a person, he can, well, like he can't, but logically the Big Bang made him do it, right? Like we can't ascribe responsibility to people in a deterministic system, right? So like what my head goes in solving this, what my head goes to in solving this is we must have like higher projections of ourselves controlling us. Like we must have free will, and that free will is not a part of this deterministic system. Like that agent that is controlling us is not a part of this deterministic system, right? I just want you to point out, what did I get wrong here? Because it's been gnawing in my mind for years. Okay.
Sure. There's lots potentially wrong. First of all, you're saying if naturalism, then the universe is deterministic. That doesn't necessarily follow. The universe may be, there's soft determinism, there's hard determinism, and there's a question about how much quantum indeterminism there is, but we don't know whether or not the universe is purely deterministic. As a matter of fact, we have good reason to think that it's softly deterministic, but not hard determinism. And so this then, even if the universe is deterministic, this, you say, eliminates free will. And this is why Dan Dennett and others advocate for compatibilism, the notion that some version of free will is compatible with a deterministic universe. I'd recommend reading like Dennett's Elbow Room, The Varieties of Free Will Worth Wanting. You may or may not wind up agreeing, but let's just assume that you're correct. And on naturalism, the universe is deterministic to some extent, and then that means there's no free will. Then you say that takes away from the value of morality, because if someone kills someone, logically the Big Bang made him do it. No. The fact that something was predetermined doesn't change whether or not we can hold a particular agent responsible, because even in a purely deterministic universe, the individual that just willfully slaughtered a family of 4 is different from the person who did not. And so you can hold that person responsible. When my truck breaks down, I fix my truck. I don't fix my neighbor's truck. I hold that truck as this is in need of some sort of addressment or treatment. And so for morality, holding individuals morally responsible is just about finding the agent that is most proximally responsible for the causal chain that leads to the effect you're talking about. It doesn't matter whether or not they were predetermined to do it or not, they did it.
But like, so would the situation change if like someone made them do it, like actually coerced them to do it? Would the situation change?
Yes, of course the situation, the situation changes. And so this is what I've described before. When Sam Harris and I were on tour, I talked about the difference in free will and moral responsibility. And that is that at any point, Sam could get up and jump off the stage and land by the front row of the audience. Or I could throw Sam off the stage and he ends up by the front row of the audience. The difference between those two things is whether or not one person is imposing their will over somebody else. If there's not another agent imposing their will over the first agent, and it's just, the circumstances, then that doesn't in any way eliminate the fact that it's their will taking the action. There's a difference between somebody who says, hang on, there's a difference between someone who says, hey, I want to drive my car through this crowd of people, and someone who loses control of their car and does not want to drive through a crowd of people and yet still does. And as long as we recognize that difference, that's all we need to assign culpability.
Yes, I would agree. But like my problem is here again, you're assuming that a will exists, right? In
No.
in the words of
No.
I don't. Yeah.
I'm not. Will does exist. I have will, whether or not it's free.
Yeah.
You have will. This is a component of agents, that agents have desires and take actions in accordance with the desire. It doesn't matter whether the universe determined what those desires were at the point of the Big Bang or 2 seconds before they happened through a flip of a coin or whatever. None of that changes the fact that if there is an agent, that agent has and exercises some will. And so when you look at the action taken, we already recognize that an action taken without undue influence from another agent is at that is the level at which we assign responsibility to that agent.
Yes, but don't you think that like when broken down like this, it's less valuable than like high morals, like that we hold on so highly, right? Like you're describing it as a part of our natural world, right? It's just like eating or drinking. Like we do it because we need to do it. We do it because like there are reasons to do it, not because like there's something. Yeah.
So what?
Don't you think that takes away from the value of it? Yeah.
Not if it's true. If it's true, how can it detract from the value of something that's not true? See, you've bought into a You've bought into a lie. Religions convinced people about free will and personal agency and responsibility and constructed a false model around responsibility. And then when we find out, ooh, wait a minute, that's not the way the universe works, and we say, here's how the universe works, you're like, yeah, but doesn't that diminish morality? No. If you have two kids who are acting up at a restaurant, and one of them, you tell them, behave and you'll get dessert, disbehave and I will beat you. And the other one, you say, hey, your actions are going to have an impact on the people around you, and you instill in them a sense of empathy and responsibility. Which one of those, and you take them back to the restaurant, they're both going to behave, but one of them is going to behave for rather simplistic carrot and stick reasons, which may go away when the parents aren't around. And the other one's going to behave because of an understanding of empathy and the consequences of their action. But in both cases, the individual taking the actions is where we put the responsibility. And that doesn't matter whether the universe is deterministic or whether there's free will, none of that. It's where else would you attribute responsibility?
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. One last question and I'll get out of your hair.
Cool.
Like in light of what you just said, other than necessity, why is morality important?
I don't know what you mean by other than necessity, but morality is the label that we put on people's actions, comparing the consequences with a goal. If the goal is to have a better world, then we're identifying the actions that lead to a worse world as immoral, and the ones that lead to a better world or maintain the world as it is as neutral or good. That's important if and only if you care about a better world. And I do. And I don't understand the people who don't.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. That was illuminating. What did you say the book's name was?
Dan Dennett's book is called Elbow Room, the Varieties of Free Will Worth Wanting. Yep.
Okay.
There's several other books by Dennett, but that's the main one on free will and determinism. So cool. Thanks, Mohammed.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. We're cranking through Super Bowl Sunday with all kinds of questions. So we've got calling from Croatia, pronouns are he, him. Is it Stefan or Stephen?
It's Stepan actually, but English version of Stepan is Steven. So you can call me Steven. Yes.
I'll call you whatever you like, but welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay. It says here that you have undeniable mathematical proof that Jesus has risen.
Yes. Well, I think it's undeniable. If you can deny it, then it's your win. But
okay,
yes.
I deny. I deny it.
You?
I deny it because there's not a single property in mathematics that maps to Jesus. So, but go ahead.
No, I will use mathematics to make a conclusion from things we observe. Okay, so it's not like math here is only a tool, not like anything more. Okay, so the
Sure.
argument goes like this. So what's the probability of Jesus not being risen if we see that so many people believe in it, if so many people experience Jesus personally, if so many people see Jesus, in many cases, and in many situations, Jesus shows up in the churches. So what's the probability of all that if Jesus has not risen?
So I have zero evidence that anyone has ever experienced or seen Jesus anywhere. I have plenty of people saying that they see Jesus or that they see the effects of Jesus, but until you can demonstrate that somebody who claims they saw Jesus actually saw Jesus, you don't get to use that as a data point.
Yeah, Stephen, what shape do you think the Earth is?
I think it's a globe. I don't.
Right,
I'm
and I
not
know
a
this isn't
person.
exactly. I know this isn't exactly the truth, but people kind of misrepresent it as being in the past everyone thought the Earth was flat. But at a time, if we imagine that the majority of people thought the Earth was flat, were they right? How could a majority of the people believe something and it be wrong, right? Because by your argument, if a lot of people believe it, it must be right. How could that many people be wrong?
No. My argument is how is it possible that all these seeings, all these beliefs are so consistent.
They're not consistent. They're not consistent though. If you ask every individual in a church to describe what they think God is, guarantee you, even within the same denomination, you're going to get a ton of different answers.
Okay.
So it's not consistent. If everyone gave the exact same answer every time, it might be a little more impressive. It wouldn't even still necessarily lead to the conclusion that you're trying to make, but it might be a stronger case. But it's not even everyone is unanimous. People vary so much on their conception of God and the Bible and their beliefs.
So, for example, Stephen, there are people who think that God talks to them, and so
yes.
If we took 100 people who think that God gave them a message, what percentage of those people are correct?
Okay, I see where you're going, and I think that you actually won this argument.
Oh, Stephen?
No.
Okay.
Maybe I was a little bit too confident in my way of thinking. But can I give you one more argument that is not connected to my first argument? So it goes like this. So it's actually a question. So what do you think about Catholic Eucharist miracles? If you've heard of them, it's like moment when this I don't know the English word, but.
I have no reason to think that any Eucharist miracle has ever occurred.
Yeah, you have all these scientific reports where real scientists that were most of the time atheists, they examined those Eucharists and concluded that it's a real human flesh, and they cannot explain how this human flesh got.
True. It's not true. What you're saying is not true. This is lies that have been fed to you and others by the church. If in fact that there was a Eucharist miracle where the cracker turned into human flesh, then this wouldn't be once upon a time there's a report that some atheist scientist did it. Any scientist could get a Eucharist cracker that has been appropriately blessed or whatever. At whatever point the church says it turns into a body, we should be able to test it. And if a scientist can do it, then any scientist could do it, and there would no longer be any debate. It would be, hey, we have confirmed that when this cracker is prayed over in this way, it demonstrably, scientifically turns into flesh. But that's never, ever happened. You are believing stories, not evidence.
You there, Stefan? Oh, maybe not. Hello?
It shows I'm still on.
It's on a web call, which makes sense from Croatia, but sometimes the web caller can be a little bit unreliable, unfortunately. Wish we had a better system, but it's the best that we got. Oh, it's unfortunate. I wanted to hear what he had to say about that, because replicability is such an important aspect of science and demonstrating the validity of your claim and the thing that you're observing. So, yeah, if that were true, it would be exactly that. You could be able to do it in a lab literally anywhere, and it would happen every single time.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where what you'll hear from some Catholics is, oh, well, the ritual thing is part of it, and it's got to be prayed over. And then some of them will be like, oh, it doesn't turn into flesh until it's inside your body. And if you try to take it back out again, it changes back. The tap dancing done is ridiculous. If, in fact, any church on the planet had actual verifiable scientific evidence that a little cracker ever turned into something other than a cracker, other than the actual, molecules that make up that cracker, if they had any evidence for that, you wouldn't be calling into a show to say, hey, what do you think about these claims? It would be, here's the scientific paper. Here's where it's been peer reviewed. Here's where it's been replicated. Here's the journal that this is in, showing that undeniably, as a confirmable scientific fact, the Eucharist cracker turns into flesh. And that does not exist. And if it could be demonstrated, what reason would any church ever have for refusing access to properly altered crackers?
Also, I think, whenever we find the most minute scientific discoveries or we rework our model even a little bit, a pop science journal will release an article that's like, aliens discovered on Mars, and that's not at all what the science is claiming, but they make the most dramatic article based on whatever the scientific finding is. You know how many pop science articles would climb over glass to be able to write the article about transubstantiation proven true? Oh my God, we would never hear the end of it.
Yeah, the Catholic League and all of those guys would be like, here it is, and we got a Nobel Prize for it, and the Templeton Foundation has confirmed it, and everybody's confirmed it. We've done it. It's awesome. Now the only question is, when it transubstantiates into flesh, what part of Jesus are we eating? Is it his foreskin? Oh, no. Is it a toenail clipping? And then the next question is, why are we in a weird cannibalistic death cult? It is bizarre that not only are Catholics convinced that this actually happens, despite the dearth of any evidence for it. It is weird that Catholics are convinced that this happens, but that they're not appalled at all by the fact that they actually think. See, I was a Protestant. I was a Southern Baptist. When we took communion, we were not remotely anti-science or ridiculous enough, even though we were plenty anti-science in other areas, to think that it actually turns into flesh, or that the wine you're drinking actually turns into blood. That is a level of absurdity and ridiculousness that is reserved for a particular group of Catholics. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, there would be no doubt. There would be no question. There would be no calling into the debate. It would be like, here's the study. Not 250 years ago, some people said, we can't tell what this is. Or, and this would be the same thing for the Lourdes miracles from France or any number of things like this. It's amazing that when we are at a point in the history of the world where we have the most access, the greatest access to the most information and the greatest understanding of the world and the greatest capacity to investigate claims, that the propensity of miracles, including transubstantiation, that can be investigated and confirmed is inversely proportional to our ability to actually investigate these things. Oh, we got cameras. All of a sudden, we're not seeing as many ghosts as we were before. We're not seeing as many spirits running around. And when we get something on the camera that looks like it, weirdly, it is perfectly explained by a mote of dust in the atmosphere or whatever else. It's like God's been hiding from science.
Well, we do have some other callers on the line, so why don't we bring back Mario?
Let's do that. Mario, you're back on the line. Welcome.
All right. So just to touch on what the first caller said, like, people don't appreciate the universe enough, like the brain is just like, the mind is just like a way that the universe made up to solve problems, like even a slime mold can solve a maze, Anyway.
Yeah, let's get onto your call.
Right.
Yeah, so I actually read on the historicity of Jesus. I even took his online class. It's there's a lot. There's a lot. It's not a book for beginners. So, would it be all right if I did like a little atheist book report and went over the highlights?
No. This is not a show for atheist book reports, especially if you just read a book that I read a decade ago.
All right. Can I?
Do you have a question? Or do you have a question or a case that you wanted to make for something or anything remotely relevant?
All right. Hold on a second.
No, I'm not holding on a second.
Yeah, I think I can.
Let's get to it.
Okay. All right. So, the thing about the Gospels is that there's nothing that's like a kernel of history. It's all for the purposes of story and theology, so that's why Jesus, New Testament scholars, and that's why historicists don't use that as evidence for the historicity of Jesus. But if it's all for the purposes of story and they're not using a historical kernel, and there was another sect called the Nestorians that used a different historical, they had a whole different story where Jesus was stoned in Lydda during the reign of King Jannaeus. So it's two completely different
I am confused
stories.
as to what are we spending time on and why?
One argument that you could make for mythicism is that there are two completely different stories. One started with Mark, the other started with the Torah.
I'm confused. Why, Mario? Are you a mythicist?
I'm saying there's an argument to be made.
Don't care. Are you a mythicist?
Well, even Richard Carrier puts the odds at
Mario.
1 in 3.
Mario, listen to me. I'm going to mute you. Nobody's going to be able to hear a word you say. And I'm going to talk to you and every other caller. If I ask you a fucking question, answer the fucking question that I asked you. It's for a reason. I'm directing a show here. And basically, what you're saying is boring me to tears. And so I was asking specific questions to try to guide the conversation in a way that wouldn't have everybody wanting to run away from the show. So answer the question that you're asked. And if it turns out that what you're calling about is a waste of everybody's time, we'll move on to something else. But if you have something that's genuinely interesting and productive, then we'll engage with that. But if you're just calling because you're bored on a Sunday and want to babble on about a position that I don't hold or give a shit about, we're probably not going to do that. So let's try this again. Hey, Mario, how you doing? Are you a mythicist?
All right. If you put a gun to my head, yes.
Okay, so you are a mythicist. How did you conclude?
Sure.
The most reasonable conclusion is that Jesus never existed, rather than there are elements about the story that you find not believable.
Well, you have this messianology in Philo, where you have this pre-existent being that's identified with the wisdom that created the world. And then you have Paul, where it's evolved into this story of Jesus getting crucified. Paul is the tricky part. That's like, I'm not dying on the hill, but so then you have Paul, who adds the crucifixion element, and then you have Mark, where he's put into a story. And the story,
Mario, how do you demonstrate, Mario, how do you demonstrate that there's a messianic figure that didn't exist, was created by somebody else, that Paul manipulated and changed without believing that he was real and historic, and that Mark then changed from Paul to put into a story? How do you prove that Mark, the author of Mark, wasn't just writing down what people actually believed?
Well, see, it's kind of like anything else that evolves. You can kind of trace every step of the way.
Mario, I'm asking you a question, and I'm bending over backward for a subject that I fucking hate. I asked a specific question, which is, what evidence and argument would you make that Mark, the author of Mark, was more likely to be taking a fiction that somebody else created and injecting it into a story than that it is the case that Mark was writing down what people actually believed and heard at the time?
Well, even people who aren't mythicists, like what's her name, Robin Walsh, has a book about how the Gospels are literature.
Mario, does the fact that somebody shut up? Does the fact that somebody wrote a book about how the Gospels are literature demonstrate that the author of Mark was more likely working with a fiction that he put into a story than that the author of Mark was reporting things that he and others may have believed? Does the fact that somebody wrote a book demonstrate that?
Well, I'm getting it. I'm going into the scholarship of it, and the scholarship of it is a lot about.
If I can interrupt, Mario, if you're getting into the scholarship, how about you call us back when you've gone through the scholarship? Deal?
I mean, I am going through it.
Yes, I
No.
know, Mario. I know you're going through it, but
You don't
honestly, I
have-
don't want to hear. I didn't want to hear Jared from Philosophy 101 detail what he knew from Philosophy 101, and I really don't want to hear your atheist book report from Mythicism 101. So, like, go
I
through the
literally
literature
told you
and then call
not
us
to give
back.
a report. But also, not in addition to not giving a book report, I'm asking you for actual evidence for something, and you don't just get to say, "Oh, somebody else wrote a book that deals with this subject." That's not how. That's not how presenting evidence for a position works. Are you able to make a valid and sound argument that demonstrates that Jesus did not, in fact, exist?
Like in a Mervyn Tonans.
No.
Oh my God.
No.
No.
The answer is no. Thank you, Mario. We'll talk to you
Bye.
another time. Goodbye.
I won't.
Before we take the next caller, let's take a moment to also plug. I know you plugged the next weekend's shows at the beginning of the show, but we also have merch available. If you go to linemerch.com, you can get some of this awesome merch. You can get that all over print pink or yellow hoodie, your You're on the Line shirt, or your The Line mug. All of those are available right now on linemerch.com. And if you support us on patreon.com, that is the best way to support the line. That is how we get more shows. That is how we get LineCon towards the end of this year. Definitely support us over on patreon.com if you can. But yeah, all right, now we got that out of the way. Who we got next?
It's funny that when somebody starts on mythicism and they're like, here's some things about the gospel, there's not a kernel of history in it. Well, that's a lie. I mean, that's already a hyperbolic, gross exaggeration to say there's no kernel of history in there. I mean, that's just bizarre. Here's my one sentence take on mythicism. I find mythicism to be an embarrassing overstatement and inversion of the burden of proof in order to claim something that nobody can confirm, that will do absolutely no good in conversations and discussions with theists, and that does not represent the best skepticism or scientific inquiry or historical inquiry that we have available to us. Much better to just say, I have no idea whether or not Jesus existed, and I'm not going to pretend that he did in order to save my soul. I'm not going to pretend that he didn't in order to dismiss your drivel. But all right. Aron in Texas. We got another Texas caller who wants to talk about reasons for reconciling religion. So, hey, Aron, let us know what you mean.
All right. So first of all, I just want to give my qualifications here. This harkens back to a video that I saw with Forrest and Jimmy. I was in the Army, and I've read 3 books by Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, so that makes me an astrophysicist.
Okay, goodbye.
But,
yeah, you're not serious.
Okay, I'm going to mute you, and I'm going to have you listen to me for just a minute, Aron, because I'm going to try to figure out whether or not I should waste any more time on this call.
I would not.
Because if that's a joke, it's not funny and not needed. I don't care what your qualifications are. I don't care what anybody's qualifications are, because that it would be a fallacious line of reasoning to suggest that because somebody's qualifications are good, that they're right. So rather than presenting your qualifications, if you wanted to talk about reasons for reconciling religion, I need to know what you mean by reconciling religion so that we can have some sort of conversation about it. But I don't care how many things by Neil deGrasse Tyson you've read. That's irrelevant. So let's try again. Aron, you're on the line. What do you want to talk about with regard to reconciling religion?
All right. So I do apologize. That was a terrible joke. I read a book, Homo Sapiens, by I forgot his name. Anyways, it's something about like how like we became Homo Sapiens from our evolution, and it made me really think that religion was a fundamental part of what made us human, because you can only really know about 100 people, but that overarching thing allows you to get into a bigger picture. And so my question is, I feel that religion has served its purpose of getting us to where we need to be as a human species. So, like, what's next?
Are you asking us to speculate on what the future looks like without religion?
Yes. Like, how to fill that void, because I'm sure that it filled such a great void for y'all being in church. I don't know if, Arden, if you were in church.
I was in church,
but I hearing your turn signal.
Yeah. So also, Yuval Harari, I think, was the author of *Sapiens*.
Yes.
I'm under the impression that that specific point has a little bit more value to it, but that a lot of that book is speculation, and that there's actually quite a lot of contention with some of the claims that he makes within that book. I have no thoughts or feelings about speculating about the future without religion. We are already living in a time where I believe a recent study showed that the majority of young people in the U.S. are now in the religious nuns category. So we already kind of exist in that time. And I wouldn't say that we're exactly at like some lack of meaning. I think there are plenty of things that tie people together. But I don't really care to speculate on the future.
I'm an advocate for secular humanism taking over, but whether or not it will or what will happen, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to. We may be done and doomed. I mean, we may not have any solution for climate change, and we're just going to waste away into oblivion. But religion isn't gone by any stretch of the imagination, even though it's in decline. And so I have real work to do right now on addressing religion as it actually impacts the society that we all share. When you're like, oh, what do you do to replace that void? I'm not convinced it's a void that needs to be replaced. When you cure cancer, you don't replace it with something else. And I view religion, at least in part, as something cancerous. Now, religions definitely, in many of them, provide a sense of community. So if you want to replace that sense of community, then you can have humanist communities, secular communities. You can have your sports community. You can have communities based around just people. You can have a knitting club, all of those things where we get people to actually interact. That's fine. Well, if in community is one of the most important aspects that people benefit from within religion, that non-religious, that secular groups would need to do to provide something to replace what may or may not be lost with religion. But you can absolutely have community without religion. It's just we have to work against a system that has been favoriting and prioritizing religion forever.
Yeah, I agree. I guess this conversation didn't go as deep as I was hoping it would, but thanks for the call, or thanks for taking my call.
Sure. Yeah, I wish I had a better answer, but I don't.
Thanks,
don't know what's likely to happen. But
if I could, just for a second, I know you kind of just did this, but part of the reason that conversation didn't go as deep as you might have hoped is because this show is not the atheist hangout and speculate about like what the world could be like, dude. This show is the call in to tell us what you believe and why show. So when you're not calling in to tell us what you believe and why, we don't have a lot to offer because that's not what this show is for. I'm all for atheist hangout stuff. I think that's great. It's kind of like you're talking about atheist community, but that's what like the Patreon events are for. That's what the American Atheist Conventions are for. There's a lot of places for exactly what you're looking for there, and it is not this show. That's not the purpose of this. Similarly, when people call in to thank us for the work, we appreciate being thanked for our work. This is not the place for that. That's not what the callers are for. We pay for these lines to let you guys call in. And when you call in to tell us thank you, honestly, it's a waste of time and money. It's better served by an email, these sorts of things. So let's try to keep this in mind with callers. If you're on the line right now and listening to me because you can hear me and you think that describes you, maybe consider calling back in and trying with an actual question or talking to the screener to rephrase your approach, because we're not this isn't the atheist hangout hour. Okay.
So we've got Richard in New York that has a question that's related to the one we just kind of addressed. So, Richard, welcome.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. I'm
No, it's fine.
literally watching it live right now. Yeah, really weird that transition the way it did. But my question is, as a secular humanist, been an atheist his entire life, who's had no utility for religious belief or belief in the supernatural without good evidence. Is there any utility in, I guess, humanists coming together and forming communities and ritualized practices, much like religion, in order to fill the kinds of voids that other people may see as religion already filling? Or would that come to, I guess, replace the dogmatism, the dogma that we've always seen with religion? What do you think?
So, yes, there's utility, and yes, it already exists in a variety of things. There's the Council for Secular Humanism. There are humanist churches. There are Unitarian churches that engage in humanist stuff. There are humanist communities. There are Jewish humanist communities. Then there's Sunday Oasis, Sunday Assembly, all of these secular things. And the thing I would caution you, Richard, when talking about this, and this is just a preference thing on my part, not saying you're wrong, is I think it's a mistake to say, ooh, they're doing the things that religions did. No, they're doing the things that humans need and want, things that religions co-opted. The getting together and being communal didn't begin with religion. That's something religions recognized in humans and co-opted and leveraged in order to propagate itself. And so when Sunday Assembly or Oasis or whatever group, secular humanist meetup group you've got gets together, they're not doing something like religion. They are doing the community that religions stole.
I completely agree with you. I recently read Religion for Atheists by Alain de Botton, and he talked about, how we should co-opt a lot of what religion does for the benefit of mankind, this universal need for a community and for a better understanding of what comes after this life, if anything at all. But I completely agree with you.
I don't recall specifically. I remember having a number of different agreements, a number of different disagreements with things that Alain de Botton put in that book. And I think it comes down to he's leaning more into, we need a humanist religion. We need religion. We need these elements of religion. This is what humanity is about. And how do we create a post-religion society? What types of things, what parts of religion do we keep? And I prefer to look at it, and it's been ages since I read his book and engaged on this, probably, I don't know, a decade or more. If I had to guess, I have some objections to some of the things that he said and some of the ways he said them, but I prefer to look at it from the standpoint of, who are we as humans and what do we need? Because if secular humanism can provide it and provide that kind of community, there's no reason to call it religion. There's no reason to look at it from the lens of religion. As a matter of fact, I'm a fan of removing that lens of default religious perspective, because if you maintain it, you're still just giving power to religion as if religion is a good thing. Well, we're already winning on that front, because a number of religious individuals would say, well, you atheists are just religious too. You guys are just as religious. You've got your own atheist religion, which every time they say that, we should say, wait a minute. Are you saying that's a bad thing? Because now that's them admitting that they're part of something they think is bad.
Yeah. I, for one, don't have any negative connotation whatsoever with the Wikipedia definition of religion, or, I understand from their perspective, this is a camp that of people that doesn't call themselves religious, but they worship this thing that they see as a belief. I don't buy that at all. I see that as BS. But humanism, as opposed to atheism, I believe is positive expression of, what we ought to do as human beings in a hedonistic, largely utilitarian sort of way, what we owe to one another, what we owe to the environment, while atheism is, by most definitions, a lack of a belief. So the two are very different. That's why I came onto this show specifically asking about humanism, but of course the two are very much interconnected, though of course not mutually exclusive. I believe, that much like humans, people have co-opted, taken, the community building aspects of what we've done as humans for millennia and built these worship houses to worship things they don't understand or stories that bring them some semblance of comfort or, awe. Do I necessarily think that we need the same thing from a humanist perspective? No. Like Carl Sagan and what was his name? Whatever. Carl Sagan, in particular, he talked about how awestruck he is at, the totality of what we already understand from the realms of science and empiricism and, just human knowledge. But what would quote unquote worship even look like in a humanistic church? I don't know, but I guess the things that I'm really interested in being established from a humanist perspective are places where people can meet and not really see. On the one hand, I really want that common identity being shared by lots of other people, that we're all human and we need to, establish some kinds of guidelines by which to live to promote happiness and well-being for everyone and, for our future as a species and for the world. But also, I also know that there's an argument to be made that could inevitably lead to dogma and separating the in-group from everyone else.
Stuff like that already exists.
Right.
You're talking about community. I just released a video the other day about why people are leaving Christianity. And number one in this particular non-representative poll was about treatment of the LGBTQ community. But the biggest issue, apart from that, across the board, was community. Now, not only do we already have something like that, but the way you prevent it from becoming a dogma is that you don't just have, oh, I'm a humanist, or oh, I'm an atheist, or oh, I go to this church. I am a skeptic, a humanist, and an atheist. The skepticism is what keeps things in check so that you don't get to something that is dogmatic. Humanism, by the way, is not at all dogmatic. I don't know anybody who tried to make an attempt of making the humanism dogmatic. I would suspect that a bunch of people would be lashing out about that, but it's easy to find and to say, hey, we don't want this to turn into a dogma. Okay, so don't.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I guess I'm trying to understand why I personally, I don't know, deeply to myself, want some kind of cohesive, singular framework to replace, I guess, theistic, supernatural understanding of the world. And maybe
Did you grow up
in a way...
Did you grow up in a religious environment, Richard?
Kind of. So I grew up in Brooklyn, raised Reformed Jewish, but never had any belief in a higher power. Never.
Were you like doing
I
like
never-
weekly
I never had
practices
an-
though, at like a temple or something?
No, just the high holidays, but more of a cultural thing. No, so I don't know. Like I have a very different experience as an atheist, where I never had a time in my life where I ever believed, not that I know of. So I just see no draw to it. You know, I've read the Bible, I've read the Torah, I've read the Quran, done all this research, and I just have no inclination to believe any of it. You know, for good reason, for lack of reason, lack of evidence. There's no reason to believe that any of it is grounded in reality. But even as a kid, just never. And I guess, in a way, I suppose and maybe it just speaks to, you know, the history of humanity and, you know, our initial lack of understanding of how the universe around us functioned, our inability to explain natural phenomena. You know, religion is huge. There are billions of believers around the world that have grown up to believe these things. They have thousands of denominations within each group. They have set guidelines by which to live. And I'm not saying at all that that secular humanism is in any way meaningless or without any sort of intrinsic guide for morality. I don't believe we have any intrinsic morality as humans, but I am a bit jealous as to the reach that religions have had in humanity for millennia, while at this point, you know, in our modern times, while there is a decline in the number of people that, you know, believe in an afterlife or believe in a higher power, you know, atheists, humanists are still being discriminated against and, you know, very much the minority. I guess I'm just a bit jealous as to the scale that
yeah, I mean, these religions have been operating for millennia. You know, most of the modern powerful ones. I think maybe if you give it 2,000 years, humanism will have that far-reaching and deeply ingrained effect on culture, but we aren't there yet. And so I get what you're saying, Richard. I also noticed that a lot of people seem to pretty much require a template handed to them to function. Mm-hmm. I get that, but it's also, I guess I'm struggling to see what the point is here. Like what you, like, I can commiserate with you. It's frustrating. I would like more people to be involved in humanism and skepticism, and I feel all that. Yeah. I just don't know what, I'm struggling to see what you're looking for in this call.
I mean, that's some of us have been working for decades.
Oh, sorry, please, can you repeat that?
I'm just saying, you're talking about what some of us have been working for decades.
That's very true. I guess I'm just communicating my frustration and just seeking your opinion as to whether this can. Well, I mean, I don't presume to know that you know all the answers, or you know, even though you're working towards this goal. But do you believe that humanism can, I guess, present? Let's see. Sorry. My question is, if this is my ideal future, I guess, of where humanism and you know, basic utilitarianism becomes established and replaces theistic belief and supernatural belief. And, people have these communities of ritual and practice. Does that lead into dogma, or is there?
I already answered this.
Oh yeah, sorry, but yeah, sorry. I guess I'm just communicating my frustration with the lack of progress that has been made, in spite of the advances we've made.
I would contend, Richard, that we've actually made a lot of progress. Like we mentioned earlier, religious nuns in some age groups are like the biggest group. And while sure, a lot of them also believe in like astrology and some other woo bullshit, I would still think that that's a step in the right direction. And again, we're talking about religions that have had millennia to make a stake in people's lives and their families. We're competing with behemoths here, and I think it's going to take some time for us to really stand a meaningful chance at competing with that on a societal level. I share your frustration, but I don't know what else I really have to offer on this.
Yeah, don't make it dogmatic. If it's getting dogmatic, you have a duty to call that out. It's called diligence.
Yes, I agree. Well, you guys have been such a huge help, and I really appreciate your time. Sorry if I took much time out from theistic callers that I'm sure are on the queue. So thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks,
awesome.
Richard. Bye.
Thanks, Richard. We do have theistic callers, or at least one. We're gonna try to get some more of them in just a second. Before I click on this, I wanted to double check with my producer to see if there was anything else that would keep me from clicking on this.
Nope. Whatever you're gonna do, we should be set. So just
sweet,
fire away.
John in Ohio wants to explain why he believes in God. John, first of all, welcome to the show, and second of all, to make this easy, I'm going to stop talking in just a second, and all we need you to do is describe what God you believe in and why you believe in that God, and whether or not you think your reason why should also convince us. Other than that, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Oh, good afternoon. The reason I know that God exists is because Jesus was God manifest in the flesh. And I believe that...
How do you know that Jesus was God manifest in flesh? Because if you're going to say you know God exists, and you know God exists because of something about Jesus, now we have to ask you, how do you know that Jesus was God in the flesh?
Because of his miracles, his teaching.
How do you know that there's any miracle? How do you know that Jesus performed any miracle?
Well, how do I know that Caesar crossed the Rubicon?
Well, John, I'm the one that's asking you the question on what you just said. I didn't say anything about Caesar crossing the Rubicon. You said you know God exists because you know that Jesus is God in the flesh. And I asked, how do you know that Jesus is God in the flesh? And you said, because he performed miracles. And I asked, how do you know he performed miracles? And that's a question that you just refused to answer. So are you going to answer or not?
Because it's recorded in writing by people that experienced it.
Where? Where is there a recording of any firsthand account of any miracle by Jesus?
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Oh, I'm sorry, but Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are not necessarily firsthand accounts, and you have no way to confirm that anything they said about miracles is accurate. And even if they were firsthand accounts, which they're not, they're anonymous. Even if they recorded a miracle and you had good reason to think that that miracle occurred, that still does not prove that the only way that someone could perform such a miracle was if in fact they were God. So you have a house of cards built on nothing but you believe what's in the Bible. But the Bible needs to be confirmed to be reliable. How do you do that? How do you confirm that the story about a miracle in the Gospel of Matthew is true? How do you do that?
Matthew and John were eyewitnesses.
No, they weren't. But even if they were eyewitnesses, the fact that someone claims to be an eyewitness does not mean that what they're saying is true. So you are wrong about the authorship of the Gospels. But even if you were right, you are in fact wrong about this, sir. It says so in the Bible. If you had read the Bible and studied the authorship of the Gospels, you would not be here confirming this, right? I can open a Bible here and read it to you directly, where the very first thing that exists in here on Matthew is in the introduction on the face page of this in my NIV that's right here, is to say that the authorship, here we go. Although the first gospel is anonymous, the early church fathers were unanimous in holding that Matthew, one of the 12 apostles, was its author. But the book is in fact anonymous. We have no original copies. We don't know who wrote it. All you're going is going with what the church fathers said. But let's say for a second, that Matthew was written by Matthew, who claims to be an eyewitness. How does that confirm that Jesus turned water into wine?
Matthew was a tax collector that Jesus called from his position for him to follow Jesus.
Matthew's profession is irrelevant. I asked if the author of Matthew claims that he saw Jesus turn water into wine, how do we know that that's true?
Matthew didn't claim that. That's in the book of John.
Do you know what the word "if" means?
I said the account of the water turning into wine is in the Gospel of John.
What the word "if" means?
I'm going to take that as a no.
Jesus said that there's only two destinations for
Do you
people.
know what
That's
the
heaven
word
and hell.
"if"
Oh
means?
my God.
Do you know what the word "if" means?
What does it mean?
It's a question.
Are you fucking kidding me?
What are you talking about?
John, does it bother you that when your beliefs are held to scrutiny, that when somebody asks a question, you can't answer the question and you have to ask a question back?
I don't know what he's talking about.
He
When
asked
his
you if
account
you
is
know
in
what the
John.
word "if" means. Have you ever been asked what a definition for a word is before? Ever in your life?
I don't know what he's referring to. He's
I said,
he's not saying.
Stop, John, I said, if the author of Matthew had said that Jesus turned water into wine, would that mean that it was true? It doesn't matter whether or not it doesn't matter whether that happened in Matthew or John or anything else. If any author of any book said that Jesus turned water into fucking wine, would that mean that it was true? That's the question.
If he was an eyewitness.
So eyewitnesses can't be wrong, is what you're saying?
Not in this case, there isn't.
Oh, really?
Okay.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. John, I don't believe you. I think you are lying to me right now. I don't think that you would just believe anything that an eyewitness told you.
Why do we have a court system where witnesses are brought in to give testimony? Why do we have a court
Witnesses are
system?
notoriously unreliable in those settings.
We know that eyewitness testimony. Stop talking, John. I'm answering your question, John. I'm answering your question. I'm answering your question, John. And if you interrupt me one more fucking time, I will hang up on you. The issue is we call in eyewitnesses to determine if we find their testimony reliable. And we do that by confirmation with multiple different witnesses and with physical facts and evidence at the end of an investigation. You have no way to investigate the author of the Gospel of John. You don't even have a way to confirm who it is. You have no way. This isn't sworn testimony. You have no way of showing that it's not just a storybook. So what you have is an ancient text that you believe and I don't. And all I asked you is, does the fact that the author, will go with John, says it happened, does that mean that it actually happened? And the answer is no. So what evidence do you have?
There are 4 eyewitnesses to what Jesus performed.
No, there are not. No, there are not, John. And even if, that big if, even if there were 4 eyewitnesses, that would not mean that what the eyewitnesses said was true, would it?
Yes, it would.
No, it wouldn't, John.
John.
You are credulous as all get out, and I don't believe. Do you believe what the Quran says about miracles?
If I had 4 eyewitnesses
Do you
in
believe what the
court,
Quran says? Do you believe what the Quran says about miracles?
the Quran was written by one person.
Okay.
Irrelevant.
John, so if you have one person writing something, that means you can dismiss it, but if you have 4 people writing something, you can't. So how many of the Gospels record Jesus turning water into wine?
4 Gospels
How
record him
many-
doing miracles. Is my point.
John, I'm muting you, and you're going to answer my question because you tried to call me out on this bullshit beforehand, and now it's coming back in your face. Of the 4 Gospels, how many of them say that Jesus turned water into wine?
1, John.
Correct. And that means you only have one author saying it, so don't you dare suggest there are 4. Do you believe Jesus turned water into wine?
Yes, but I'm talking about all of
What?
his miracles. All of them.
No, John. Why do you believe Jesus turned water into wine when there's only one author that's telling you that?
Because maybe he was the only one that was there at the time.
Maybe Muhammad was the only one who heard from an angel. How do you know? You just dismissed the entirety of the Quran because it's written by one person, and you're going to say that you believe Jesus turned water into wine, which was written by how many people again? And then you make an excuse that he was the only one that knows. Yes, your standards of evidence, John, are wholly inconsistent, and that demonstrates a bias. And it's not a bias towards truth. It's a bias towards what you've been taught from the Bible,
Yeah,
which is
John.
why you believe bullshit.
John.
I'm talking about all of his miracles. All of his miracles.
Which is why you believe bullshit like you know who the authors are of anonymous books.
Hey, John, you should go onto YouTube right now and type in, John, shut up. You should go onto YouTube right now and type in eyewitness ID class exercise. I watched this when I was in Psychology 101 back my, I think, sophomore year of college. It is an experiment that they use in introduction to psychology classes to demonstrate how completely unreliable eyewitness testimony is, even if you actually had it, which you don't.
If I had 4 eyewitnesses in court to a murder, I could send somebody to the death chamber.
John, you don't have 4 eyewitnesses, and if you had 4 eyewitnesses, we would have said you had 4 eyewitnesses. But the notion that you are willing to send someone to the death chamber based on 4 eyewitnesses is fucking appalling.
It's the reason why you aren't in charge of any of our courts.
In this country, people are sent to the death chamber based on 4 eyewitnesses.
They should, no, sir. Find me anybody who went to the death chamber based just on 4 eyewitness testimonies, and I will find you a court case that is unjust. First of all, the death penalty is unjust to begin with. But the notion that you would be willing to kill someone based on what 4 people told you, you should be embarrassed because you have horrible standards of evidence, you have inconsistent standards of evidence, and you believing bullshit.
Judges do that every day in this country. Judges do that every day.
True.
No, sir, they don't. But even if they did, that wouldn't make it right, would it?
John, it's great to know that you really like to watch political drama on the television, but that's not actually how it works. John, that's not actually how it works. I'm glad you like political TV, but Judge Judy isn't real life, just to let you know.
Yeah.
We're talking about reality here. We're not.
No, you are not talking about reality, actually.
Arden and I are talking about reality. You're talking fantasy. You have unrealistic, fantastical standards of evidence that is convincing you to believe shit that you have no good reason to believe. Do you have anything else other than, do you have anything else other than you believe the Bible that proves that there is a God?
I believe that Jesus performed miracles.
Okay. John, I've muted you. Nobody can hear you. I'm not asking you what you believe. I'm asking you whether or not you have evidence to support your beliefs. This is really simple. If you believe Jesus did stuff. Do you have anything other than the Bible to confirm any of the things you believe about Jesus? Yes or no?
Yes. The same as I have evidence
What?
that Socrates,
What?
that Plato,
What?
that Caesar, that I have evidence.
No, John, you're not fucking listening. I asked if you had evidence other than the Bible to support your claim that Jesus is God. I asked you if you had it. You said yes. I'm going to unmute you in a second so that you can present it. But you don't get to say you have the same evidence as you have for Plato existing because A, whether or not Plato existed is an open question that nobody cares about and that you cannot confirm. But what I asked you for was not a tu quoque of, oh, I can point to these other things. It was, do you have evidence and what is that evidence? So what is the extra biblical evidence that Jesus exists and is divine? What is that evidence?
I don't need any other evidence.
Thank you for your admission. Goodbye.
I think the entire time we were on that call, in John's head, For the Bible Tells Me So, from Apologia's channel, was just playing on repeat over and over again. Da, 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 da.
This is really simple. If I ask a question, all you got to do is answer it honestly. And if you are like John and you are convinced that the Bible is true and you don't need any other evidence, fine. John will continue to believe probably until the day he dies, and he will continue to be irrational and wrong. But the issue here is, do you have evidence that you think someone else should accept? And in John's case, he doesn't have anything other than the Bible. That's his admission. And the Bible does not confirm that Jesus existed and was divine and is divine. It doesn't confirm any of that. But John believes it because he's convinced of the lies that the church has told him about it being authorship by eyewitnesses, which it's not. And John believes it because he thinks that this particular eyewitness testimony is reliable while dismissing other eyewitness testimony for competing worldviews. That means that he has as a technical term, is a fucking mess of a flawed epistemology. And when your epistemology is a complete fucking mess, you have no likelihood and no way to demonstrate any likelihood that you're ever going to reach the correct answer. All you're doing is engaging in bias confirmation.
I think what bothers me the most about that too is if you bothered to Google eyewitness testimony, New Testament, you would immediately find that the majority of Christian biblical scholars admit that we don't know the authors of the Gospels. Like, this would happen in a Google search instantly, which just shows to me that John genuinely doesn't care about his beliefs, whether or not they're true, because he's never bothered to even take the most minimal effort step in researching them.
My pinky's not working. I was trying to type you a message, and I finally got to send you the message in Messenger. My pinky hit the wrong key 4 times in a row, so I couldn't send that. But, all right.
Yeah. Good.
There we go. We have, is it Kamyar or Kamyar calling from California?
Hi, you can call me Cam. It's easier.
Hey, Cam, how are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm all right. What do you got?
All right. So I would like to talk about 2 different things. They both should be short. First of all, Matt, thank you so much for these shows. They're amazing. I think I learned lots of logic from you. I hope one day you're going to make a logic course. I would really appreciate it. I would buy the course from you. All right.
That'd be a mistake.
Anyway.
Buy better courses.
Why would it be?
Because I don't have the relevant expertise to do an entire book on that from anything beyond a colloquial standpoint. But I appreciate your encouragement.
Yeah, I would say you know logic more than other people, especially like definition, names, things like that most people don't know. I don't know all of it too. So anyway, so I would like to talk about free will versus determinism, and I wrote some notes. I tried to make it as simplified and detailed so it makes sense. I put it in a formal logic. It's in a P then Q form. and my P includes two P's. P1, P2. P1 and P2 implies Q. So I will mention P1 now. So all physical matter, including the brain, is governed by the laws of physics. Can we agree with P1 as a premise?
All physical. One more time.
All physical matter, including the brain, is governed by the law of physics. This is my premise 1, P1.
By the law of physics.
Yes.
I don't know what the law of physics is.
So everything in this universe, if we assume everything is physical, they are all governed by the law of the physics. If brain is physical, therefore it is governed by the laws of the physics.
Okay, we'll just go with that. I'm not necessarily convinced that that is true, but okay.
Okay, I'll read it again just in case. All physical matter, including the brain, do you agree that the brain is physical?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, is governed by the law of the physics in the universe. So the universe has the laws of the physics that always existed, and they're governed. They are inside of this law. They function based on those laws. So nothing can go against those laws.
I don't know that that's
physical
true.
Thing in this universe. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me just go to the P2 then. P2, brain processes are determined by the law of the physics. Everything that happens in our brain, they're atoms. Let's say this is the smallest form. They're all functions based on the cause and effect. A causes B, B causes C. They're all atoms in our brain. The movement, everything is determined by the previous states and the previous events. This would be my P2.
Okay.
And this implies if you put these P1 and P2 together, then our thoughts, this implies, then our thoughts and decisions, which are product of our brain, are also determined by the laws of the physics. That means free will cannot exist because there is no boundary that we can escape the physical laws of the universe and get free will from that. Because everything is part of this universe, which is... Mm-hmm.
Why does free will require an escape from the laws of physics?
Because in the universe, based on the tentative position, if we go, either universe includes randomness or everything is based on cause and effect. If we take one of them, for example, cause and effect, then free will cannot exist because everything is based on the cause.
No.
A causes B, B causes C, and so far.
Kim.
Yes.
So, Kim, I've had this conversation about 53 times, including Stephen and I did it on Rationality Rules channel. What I'm saying is, where's the demonstration that free will requires there to not be determinism? See, this is the entire purpose of Dan Dennett's book, Elbow Room, The Varieties of Free Will Worth Wanting, is to talk about what sort of free will might exist in a deterministic universe and to show that there is a variety of free will or will that is compatible with the deterministic universe. You're saying if the universe is deterministic in any way, then it is fully hard deterministic and the laws of physics apply, and there can be no will at all because that requires a suspension of the laws of physics. And all I'm saying is, how do you know that?
So I think it would be better to define what free will is then. Free will, based on my understanding, would be that free will is you're making your own decision that may or may not be influenced by other things. Is that what free will is? Is that correct?
It depends. So there are. Do you realize there are different categories of free will? That there are for things like libertarian free will and non-libertarian free will. Do you realize that free will doesn't just mean one thing? That there's a robust literature in the philosophical circles talking about what free will is or isn't, and that's why Dan Dennett's book Elbow Room is subtitled the varieties plural of free will worth wanting. So you can't, if all you're trying to do is say that libertarian free will is in conflict with determinism, yes, we've all known that for ages.
So there are many definitions of free will, but one is only correct. Correct? Either
No.
it exists or it doesn't.
No. The fact that only one of them is going to be correct doesn't mean that you know which one is the one that's correct.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying I know which one is correct, but I'm putting all of these free will into those.
No,
Sorry,
you don't get to put all of them into one bucket. You don't get to put, so if there's 10 varieties of free will and you don't know which one of them is actually correct, or maybe there's an 11th one that you don't know about at all that may be correct, what good is it to argue against numbers 2, 3, 7, and 8?
So my point is, let me just, I guess I can summarize this. My point is, none of your decisions are actually based on you. Every decision you make is based on the previous inputs that you got. So would this mean determinism to you? Is that the definition? That's my argument here. So I don't care about the many different free wills.
Cam, the fact that you're making decisions based on information doesn't mean that your decision is dictated. How could you possibly make decisions? How could you possibly have a will that is not impacted by information and what you've experienced? How is that even possible?
I thought that's what some people believe. Like, oh, you can make decision by yourself without influence of anything. But I don't believe that. I think every decision is influenced by something, and it's 100% influenced.
Cam, you're talking about one specific version of free will. If you're just going to say that this particular version of free will is clearly bullshit, yes, most of us have known that for decades, if not more. That doesn't mean that free will is bullshit. You have to actually define which version of free will you're talking about. And if all you're saying is that the libertarian concept of free will that you could have done otherwise doesn't make sense with determinism, yes, we already know and have said so for ages.
Okay, so in my argument, then I don't even want to talk about free will. I want to talk about hard determinism, because this argument that I had with the P1, P2 implies Q, it proves determinism, hard determinism. So we can even throw the free will away from this conversation. Based on my P and my P2, it implies Q. This proves it's all deterministic because everything in the brain is physical.
No, it doesn't.
And they're all function based on cause and effect.
I'm sorry, but whether or not everything in the brain is physical does not prove whether hard determinism or soft determinism is true. You can't just go to a brain and say the brain is physical, therefore hard determinism is true. That's not what hard determinism is. That's not how you would make an argument or a case for it at all. You don't get just to pick one element of reality and say this element, therefore hard determinism.
So if brain is all physical, let's assume if that's the case, every physical thing in the brain, every physical thing in the universe, like every atom, everything that has a movement, it functions based on cause and effect. Do we agree with this? Or
not necessarily, but it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is you cannot make an argument about the brain and then reach the conclusion that because the brain is a certain way, therefore the entirety of reality is consistent with and only consistent with hard determinism as opposed to soft determinism. That's just not how arguments work. It's like saying because my fingernail is hard, therefore everything about my body is hard. That's simply not true. It is a fallacy to take a characteristic of a subset and apply it to the superset.
So my argument with P1 and P2, it has a logic error inside of it then, because they all went in the nice flow, what I created with P1, P2, and the Q. So,
1
Yeah.
Let me show you this. Restate your P1.
Okay. All physical matter, including the brain, is governed by the laws of the physics. That's P1. Also, I'm not able to see a screen if you're sharing something. I'm on a phone.
Nope.
No. So P1, all physical matter, including the brain, is subject to the laws of physics. That's your first premise.
P1.
That's your first premise. What's your second?
And P2, brain processes are determined by the law of the physics.
So your argument is invalid in structure. And a syllogism has a major term, a minor term, and a connecting term, a major premise, a minor premise, and a connecting term. You cannot make a conclusion about therefore the universe is hard deterministic if neither the universe nor hard determinism is in either of your premises. That's not how a valid syllogism works. You cannot put in, hey, the brain obeys the laws of physics, therefore the universe is hard deterministic. Because you need the universe. You need the universe as one of the premises, and you need hard determinism.
So my Q does not include universe or hard determinism. Let me say my Q again. My Q includes...
No, Cam. You said that because the brain obeys the laws of physics, therefore your argument, which we've just listened to, proves that hard determinism is true. That's not possible, Cam. You need to go back to the drawing board and make sure that your premises include universe and hard determinism, because you cannot have a term in the conclusion that doesn't exist in the premises.
I agree with you. Can I say my Q again?
Did you not, just a couple of minutes ago, state that your argument that you are presenting right now proves that hard determinism is true? Did you say that?
Yes, but those words are not included in the Q. I have other words.
Ham, there's no fucking but. You said your argument proves that hard determinism is true. Does your Q include either the universe or hard determinism? Then your argument does not fucking prove that the universe is hard, that hard determinism is true. Period.
That's fine. I agree with you. Can I say my Q now?
Why?
It doesn't include universe or hard determinism, because my Q was something else.
I don't give a
to hard determinism and universe.
I don't give a fuck. You said that your argument proved that hard determinism is true, and it can't, which you've already agreed to. What is it that you think your argument proves?
Okay, Matt, I have one question. Is hard maybe my definitions are flawed. Is hard determinism equals to our thoughts and decisions are determined by the physical law? Is that the case or no?
No.
Okay, then my definition was completely wrong. I'm sorry. So my Q is not about hard determinism. My Q is our thoughts and decisions are determined by the laws of the physics. That's my Q, which doesn't include hard determinism and it doesn't include universe, because those don't exist in the premise. That was my Q. I'm sorry. I thought hard determinism equals to that our thoughts are by the physical laws. There's no will. That's what I thought, but I may be wrong here. So
your
going
first
with
premise,
this Q, does it make sense?
So your first premise, is that everything is physical and follows physical laws.
Yes. Correct.
How do you know? How do you know? How do you fucking know that there isn't more than just the physical? The fact that something is consistent with and follows the physical laws doesn't mean that that's all that it follows, does it?
That's right. There could be more.
So if it's not all inclusive, Your first premise doesn't even tell you anything, just that physical things are consistent with physical law, but it doesn't tell you that that's all they're consistent with, does it?
That's right.
And if it doesn't tell you that that's all they're consistent with, then you're not making an argument for hard determinism. You're just making an argument for physical things are compatible with physical laws.
Yes. And brain is a physical thing. So it's compatible with the physical law and functions based on the physical law. Doesn't function based on you. Functions based on physical law.
No. You said it functions with physical laws, but it doesn't function based on you. You just acknowledged that while it is consistent with physical laws, you cannot demonstrate that it's not also consistent with other things. You can't show that there's not a magical spirit that is also controlling the brain, can you?
That's right, I cannot.
Correct. So then why did you assert that it's not happening when you can't show that it's not happening?
So can we go with the tentative position? Because science can only detect physical things, non-physical things.
No, sir, we're not going to go with the tentative position because you are leading the evidence. You have an invalid argument. You are leading it where you want to go. You are making claims about what's not possible. And then when I question you on it, you acknowledge that you can't make that claim. And now you want to respin it. What is the fucking point if you have no way of disproving the notion that there's something other than the physical law that might have an impact? I'm not saying it is. I'm saying if you can't show that it's not, what's the point?
I see your point. So science can never prove anything that's not physical. Therefore, we will never reach that point, I guess.
No, that's not true either. How on earth do you know what science will or won't be able to confirm about things that are currently viewed as beyond the natural world in the future?
Okay, I guess I can take a probability that based on the past, we can never detect that anything physical. Therefore, we will not detect it.
I'm not interested in you trying to approximate a probability based on past experience. That falls to the problem of induction. You can't you can't do a deductive. You're trying to do a deductive argument and making it rely on inductive arguments.
Right. Deductive would be not probable. Inductive is probable, right? Sorry, I don't know the words.
Sure.
Which one relies on probability, inductive or deductive?
Inductive reasoning isn't going to be assured. Deductive reasoning, the conclusions necessarily follow from the premise.
Okay, deductive is the math and hard proof. Okay.
And abductive is arguing towards the best explanation. But what is it we're trying to do? Because if all you're doing is looking at the world and saying, hey, the brain's a physical object that operates in accordance with physical laws. Okay, I got no problem with that.
Yes.
If you say that the brain only operates in accordance with physical laws, my question then is, okay, how do you know that? Oh, well, I don't. Cool, then you don't get to say it. Then if you say, because the brain operates in accordance with physical laws, therefore there's no free will. Well, what's your definition of free will? And how does operating in accordance with physical laws preclude free will? You haven't done any of that work.
Right. Makes sense. So it's possible in the future that we detect something that the science can detect something that's not physical. It may happen. If everything is physical, I don't see how free will can put a shoe in there and say, oh, yeah, there's something magical. I can make decisions based.
That your inability to see it isn't an argument for it not existing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, makes sense. You're right.
I get where you're at, Cam, in that, hey, if in fact the universe is deterministic or largely deterministic, soft determinism, hard determinism, whatever, we know that hard determinism isn't true, or it's apparent that hard determinism is not true because of quantum indeterminacy. However,
randomness, right?
No, it's not randomness. It's not necessarily the same thing as randomness. And randomness doesn't necessarily, I don't see any path from randomness to an exercise of will. That's not the point. The point is, If there's a brain and it operates in ways that are consistent with the laws of physics, the question then becomes, where's the room left over for what we generally call free will? And in order to talk about that, you've got to say, here's a variety of different free wills that people have proposed. Which ones are inconsistent with the facts of the universe, and which ones might still be consistent with the facts of the universe?
I see.
And then, if it turns out that there's nothing at all that we can identify as anything other than will, whether or not it's free or not, like we have no way of determining how free your will is, but that you have will, what difference does any of this make? Because at the end of the day, you are still an agent that takes actions, and you'll be held responsible for those actions, as am I.
That's right.
Does it make any difference whether or not, when the universe began, it dictated that you would, I don't know, pee in the pool, and it dictated that somebody else wouldn't pee in the pool? At the end of the day, if you're the one that peed in the pool, you're still the one we're probably going to ban from the pool.
I mean, that's totally right. It's just I was trying to get closer to the truth. I understand it doesn't matter at the end, but my problem is we have wants, and then we take action based on those wants. But where do these wants come from? We cannot question that. It just comes there to our
You can
brain.
question
We
it.
want this. We want that.
You can question it. What
it
you
just
don't get
comes.
to do is pretend that you know what the answer is.
Yeah, that's right. But based on like our experiences, our wants is just there, and we function based on those wants. And it's just randomly it's there, you know. Like I don't see how that can
you
be.
don't know that it's
evil
random.
because it's there.
You don't know that it's random. You don't know if the question is, why do we desire what we desire? That's a perfectly fine question, and you can explore it. But you start with an answer of, I don't know why we desire what we desire. And you can explore, and you can come up with potential explanations and try to support those with evidence. But at the end of the day, you either have a good case for why we desire what we desire, or you don't. If all you're doing after 23 minutes of having this discussion is acknowledging, hey, we don't know how free our will is, we don't know how hard deterministic the universe is, and we don't know why we desire what we desire. Yeah, I knew all that before we started.
That's right. It's just I don't pick my desires. It's just they're there, and
I don't pick my desires either.
Based on those desires.
I don't think you can pick your
I don't
beliefs.
see how that's free will. You know, that's why I don't see free will existing, because we don't pick our desires. It's just there. You know.
There's a difference between not being convinced that free will exists and arguing that free will doesn't exist. And whether or not you pick your desires may be irrelevant to whether or not your will is as free as it could be.
I thought they're very similar. Like desires equals to free will. That's what I thought. Like
no, desire equals will.
On the desires.
Desire equals will. Whether or not it's free or how free is an issue with definitions of free will. This is Stephen and I had this conversation, and he got me to basically stop arguing. While I'm still a compatibilist that our will is compatible with determinism, I can no longer assert how confident I am in how free it is. Free of what? Well, the thing that we most care about is whether or not we are free from impositions of will by other agents. If a rock comes down the hill and hits me in the head, I don't feel like anybody needs to be blamed or be held responsible for that. But if you pick up a rock and throw it at my head, now I have another agent who took an action. And it doesn't matter whether the universe dictated that you would take that action at the very beginning of the universe, or whether you decided it magically at the instant that you were throwing it. Neither of those things matter to whether or not I'm going to view and should view you as the agent that we must hold responsible, because you've demonstrated that whatever the reason is, whether it's the universe set you on a path of throwing rocks or you just decided you like throwing rocks, you are now the rock thrower.
Right. because the action is the same. It doesn't matter where it came from, you're saying.
It would be nice to know, but it's like
that's why I'm curious.
If your house is on fire, we can figure out maybe later how the fire started, but the first issue is to put the fucking fire out.
Yes. Yeah. That's the path I was going, trying to figure out, is my decisions my own, or is it from the beginning of the universe based on A causes B and C? But
I don't know.
Thank you
I don't
so
know
much.
that those are the only two options.
Yeah, I don't know either. Based on what I see, if everything is physical, then it's cause and effect. Or randomness, again, it's not in your control. It's either randomness or cause and effect, because quantum proves randomness exists.
No, sorry. You've once again, you just keep taking an extra step. It's either randomness or it's not. That's a true dichotomy. You don't get to say it's either raw cause and effect or it's not. That's a true dichotomy. To say it's either raw cause and effect or randomness and no other option, you don't get to say that. You don't know what you don't know. Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Just stop.
It could be always something else.
Stop taking this and going the extra step to assert something that you don't know, and just say I don't know.
You're right.
Yeah. I think we can all agree that the rock that was thrown was an atheist, though, right?
One more thing, Matt. It's very quick thing. Quick thing. Last thing, I think it's Muslims, people who believe in Quran. I don't know much about Bible, but they say free will exists. In Quran, I think, also Bible maybe says free will, you can make your own decisions. I'm not sure about that part. But anyway, I see it. There's a contradiction here. If God is all powerful and he can see the future, how can free will exist at the same sentence? Because if God can see the future of your action, then free will cannot by definition exist. If God is not powerful, then free will can exist.
So the argument that I've made about this is that there are three prongs. It is only under the circumstance where God created this universe, could have created a different universe. So when God actually chose to create this universe instead of another universe, knowing what would happen, only when all three of those things exist do you have a demonstration that you have no will. You've never made any decision because God picked the universe under which you and I are having this exact conversation instead of picking a universe where you and I had a different conversation. But you need all three aspects of that. One, that God created everything, that God knew what was going to happen, and God could have created it different. You have to have all three of those, not just two. Because otherwise, for example, I don't exist within the timeline of The Bachelor, this reality TV show. I'm not on there. I'm not participating. I'm not at the Bachelor house or anything else. But if I watch the episode, I now know everything that's going to happen in that episode. I am essentially outside of the timeline of that episode. But the fact that I know exactly what happens doesn't mean that I picked it. So you need all three prongs of God knowing what would happen and picking what would happen, and that God could have picked something else because now God has made the decision. But, yeah.
Sorry, I'm a little bit lost on the 3 points, but based on my understanding, if God is so powerful, therefore he can see the future. Therefore he sees the future of every action. That doesn't go with free will, but...
Nope, none of that's correct.
I'll rewatch the video.
Hang on. Omnipotence is about all power. Omniscience is about all knowledge. It is possible to have all power that is possible and not have complete knowledge of the future. It's also possible that you can have complete knowledge of what is knowable and yet not necessarily know the future because the future may be unknowable. We don't know. So it's about God having the ability to know the future without error. And that's not a facet of omnipotence. That's a facet of omniscience. And you can say that God knows everything that is knowable, and that might not include the future.
Oh, I see. So don't most TS people claim that God knows everything, including the knowledge of the future? I thought that's their claim, because apparently God knows everything.
A
thought
good
that's
chunk
what
of
they
them.
claim. And yeah,
good
and at the same time, they say free will exists, which is a major contradiction for me somehow. Because if God see the future, that means you don't have the free will. But I think I understood your point that you need all three. Like, you can be powerful, but you may not know the future.
Correct. And you may know the future, but you may not know it exactly. You may just know what the probabilities are. But yeah, if the whole point is, that free will is incompatible with Christianity and Islam in their normative forms, then yes, that's completely incompatible.
Yes, that's what I think too, because they claim God knows everything. But yeah, I mean, it really surprises me how people believe these things. It's kind of like scary to me. It's very scary. Like, you live your life believing in stories from thousands of years ago, and those beliefs, you make decisions based on your beliefs too. And that's why we see many people kill other people because of their beliefs. Like, but especially in Muslim countries, it's crazy. Like, people believe it. Like, I don't know. I'm surprised.
It's really easy. You presented a fallacious argument. All that's needed is for somebody to become convinced of a fallacious argument and use that argument in support of another fallacious argument. If you're not able to spot the fallacy in your argument, then it doesn't take much to go from, hey, here's a claim, to boom, I believe there's a God and that it's magical, and it's just compounding fallacies.
Yeah, I guess this is what I did today. I am one of those people. I made fallacies today too. But we are
because you get past them. Yeah, that's the thing, is that none of us are perfect thinkers. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Yeah. It's about what happens when you get those mistakes pointed out. And you're willing to correct them, so good for you. Thanks, Cam.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, Arden. Thank you.
Thanks, Cam. All right, I have two things I need to cover before we take the next call. One,
sweet.
We're going to do a little mic test, because if I see one more person comment on your mic clipping, I'm going to murder everyone in chat.
Fucking Christ.
So actively talk and just drop your mic a little bit for me. You do a little. Everyone gets to see this is what it's like backstage before the shows.
Okay.
All right.
I have now set this up at the exact spot. I'm looking. There is no clipping on my mixer. There is no clipping on my my audio in OBS. What's happened, for the people who don't know, and I'll keep talking while Arden's actually looking at this, is that Windows sucks. And Windows decided, after I had absolutely everything set up, for the record, there's a Rodecaster Pro over here. That's my mixer that all the mics and everything else go through. It's great for levels, gives you that NPR bump, and all this other stuff. And then that comes into my machine, where I use OBS to create a virtual camera in order to have that work with vMix and send in this. But whether or not the browser that I log into vMix pulls it from OBS or from the Windows setting is a separate issue. But what Windows does is there's a separate volume control for the microphone, and you got to dig down a little bit to find that setting. After having everything set up with a microphone at 80 or 85%, which is optimal before things start actually clipping, I've now put it back to 85%. Windows reduced that to 50% without telling anybody anything. And so now the videos that I've done for the last 2 months are noticeably quieter. Thanks to Apologia for pointing out exactly what the levels were, because I was having people say, your mic sounds quiet. Well, I'm listening through the mixer. And when I listen to videos, they're going back through the mixer. And when you're listening to this show, Arden is mixing me in so that all the levels are normalized. Right. We fixed the problem with Windows, which boosted me here, and now we've corrected it, I hope.
Yeah, on the production side, I'm also getting his audio through the vMix mixer, but which isn't necessarily what you guys hear going out. So, but I don't think I hear any more of the clipping. I sort of heard it, but it was nowhere near what we normally hear with callers when they're clipping because they're like eating their mic. The only other thing I wanted to add is that I think one of the most meaningful contributions that I've done to your activism is gifting you with The Bachelor as an analogy. So you're welcome for making you watch The Bachelor. I know you love it so much. I had a hard time not laughing when that came up.
Yeah, it was for some reason. I think it's because I skipped this week. It was on my mind.
All right. Let's get to some of these other
Here we
calls.
go. Hey, Omar, somewhere in the United States, pronouns are he, him, wants to talk about the Bible and slavery. So welcome, Omar. How are you?
Good, Matt. How are you doing today, buddy?
Yeah, tired, but
yeah.
The Chiefs are in the Super Bowl. I should care more, but I don't.
There you go. Hey, so thanks for taking my call. And I know you've talked about this before and you've said a lot of things about it. So I want to make sure I get it right in terms of what your position is. So I want to start by asking you just a couple quick questions. So do you believe that the Bible encourages or promotes slavery? Because I've heard you say things similar to that. So I just wanted to understand your position.
Yes.
Okay. So you believe it encourages and promotes slavery?
Yes.
Okay. So, and where do you get that from? Where exactly in the Bible are you getting
Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy by noting that slavery is morally permissible and providing laws about who you're supposed to enslave, how much you're supposed to pay for them, how your Jewish slaves are treated differently from your Gentile slaves. All of those things serve to encourage and allow and permit as morally permissible owning other people as property, as it expressly says.
Right. So those are all Old Testament books. And so
why is that relevant?
And I'll go back. Yeah.
Why does it matter? See, and I'm stopping here because I hear this all the time. Oh, that was the Old Testament. Okay. Why does it matter if it's in the Old Testament or the New Testament? Because are you suggesting that slavery used to be moral but isn't anymore? And if the Bible in the Old Testament supports slavery, am I not right in saying that the Bible supports slavery?
So are you ready to hear what your fallacy is?
Okay.
Your fallacy is your fallacy is the fallacy of cherry picking one portion of the Bible and then coming to a conclusion. So hold on, let me finish my point.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Omar. Does the Bible at any point say that slavery is not morally permissible?
So that is the fallacy of I call it the exact word criteria. So the exact word,
Omar,
is not going to be in there in that way. What is the takeaway message of the Bible?
Omar,
that's my question to you.
Omar,
what is the takeaway message of the Bible?
The takeaway message of the Bible is that you can buy slaves and they become your property that you can pass on to your children.
So that is just wrong. That is a lie. That is absolutely a lie. Yes, it is a lie. The takeaway message of the Bible is Matthew 22. Let me finish my point. You have an evangelical background, so you should know
I'm
this.
asking you. When you asked me what the takeaway of the Bible is, I was talking about takeaway of the Bible on slavery. Are you saying that I'm wrong and that the Bible does not say that you can own people as property and pass them on to your children?
So I'm going to answer your question. If you may, please just give me 30 seconds to make my point.
No. Okay. Now I've muted you, Omar. I'm asking a very specific question, and you do not get to move on to the next point you want to make until we resolve this one. That's the way this works. I'm saying that the Bible expressly says that you can own slaves as property and pass them on to your children. Am I correct that the Bible says that, yes or no?
Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay.
Am I correct? The Bible says that. Am I correct, yes or no, that the Bible says that?
In those books and in those verses of the Bible, yes. You're correct.
Yes. All you had to do was say yes, because that's what exposes the fact that when I'm asked about what the Bible says, I tell you what the Bible says. Does the Bible at any point ever say that slavery is immoral?
So the exact word criteria that you're using, no, it doesn't.
Why not?
Because the takeaway message in the, am I muted right now, or can I be heard on the show?
You are not muted.
I just asked you a question.
Okay.
Why not?
Sure.
Why is it the case?
Yeah.
Why is it the case that the Bible expressly says you are allowed to own people as property and pass them on to your children, and the Bible never says that slavery is immoral? Why didn't God fix that?
So he did fix it. He fixed it when God says in the Bible, in Matthew 22:36-40, when Jesus' followers say, what are the greatest commandments? And the first commandment, as you know, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart. And what is the second greatest commandment? Which is to love your neighbor as yourself. So your attempt at cherry picking, cherry picking 3 verses.
So God couldn't bother to be specific about slavery, but he was totally down to be specific about shellfish. Shut the fuck up, Omar.
Omar is completely dishonest, accusing me of cherry picking.
You guys have tantrums when Christians rebut you. You guys
You're not shut the fuck up. I'm muting him. I muted him because I was trying to get a point out. So God couldn't be specific about slavery, but God definitely made the time in your Bible to be specific about mixed fabrics and shellfish in tattoos. Sounds like if your God does exist, he's a piece of shit that nobody should give the time of day at all.
But you're not rebutting. You've called me a liar when I wasn't lying, and you've suggested that we're cherry picking when I'm the one that's reading exactly what verses say, and you are cherry picking to suggest that there's a broader message that we can interpret, which is love thy neighbor as thyself. Under what Matthew actually says about loving your neighbor as yourself, neighbor may only apply to fellow Christian and not necessarily to the heathen that surround you, from which you are permitted to buy your slaves. So if you're going to accuse me of lying, you better be able to show that I'm lying. And so far, I'm completely accurate in what I've said it supports. Now, if you're going to accuse me of cherry picking, you need to not cherry pick, and you need to explain how the Bible demonstrates that slavery, owning another person as property, is immoral, because it never says that, and it never suggests that. And it could have. It would have been very easy for Jesus, along with all the other things that he said, to say, hey, you're not morally permitted to own people as property. And if God exists and knows about the future, he knew this argument was going to come up, and he punked you by setting you up on the weakest possible footing.
Also, the notion that you told us we're throwing a tantrum over this issue is hilarious, because I will gladly throw a tantrum over you defending a God that explicitly endorses slavery, because that makes me a better person than your God every day of the week. Absolutely. If you think it's a tantrum to object to slavery, sounds like you're also a garbage person. So you and your God are perfect for each other.
So that's a straw man. So that's a straw man. You're trying to straw man me, trying to allege that I promote or encourage or condone
I didn't
slavery.
say that.
So
I didn't say that at all.
No, well, that's what you're saying in so many ways.
No,
I didn't say that at all.
I'm muting you. You're muted again. Now you've accused Arden of a straw man that she didn't say at all. So you've accused me of lying when I wasn't. You've accused us of cherry picking when you're the one that's cherry picking, and you're the one that's doing your little intra-Jesus, exegesis to figure out exactly what's most important. And now you're accusing Arden of a fallacy. Instead of being a smug prick who thinks you can just name a fallacy and suggest that we're wrong, why don't you actually defend where your Bible can be viewed as a morally superior book when it comes to slavery? How is your book superior to me and my views on slavery when it comes to slavery?
I'm totally down to answer your question, as long as you guys don't start swearing and muting as I'm answering.
I'm going to swear as much as I fucking want. Cry more. Just make your argument. Why do you have to bitch? Why do you have to start with complaining when you could just do it?
I've muted you again because I will mute you anytime I fucking want to on this show. And I will say whatever fucking word I want to fucking say on my fucking show. And you accusing us of everything under the sun while demonstrating none of it is a problem. Now, are you going to whine when I take you off hold about how we muted you or we said a word that you don't like? Or are you going to actually show how your preferred book is morally superior on the subject of slavery? One or the other. You're up.
Sure. So let's dig into the slavery. So context matters, words matter, what they mean matter. Slavery in the Bible as well, particularly those books and verses that you quoted from, in where you're alleging it condones, promotes, and encourages slavery, doesn't mean what we know of slavery today.
Don't like, say it. Don't say it, Omar. Don't say it.
I'm pausing to mute you. It specifically says that you can buy your slaves from the heathen that surround you. It specifically says that they become your property to be passed on. It specifically says they are your money, they are your property, and that you can beat them as long as they don't die within a day or two. Is it moral to view another human being as property to be passed on and permissible to beat them? Are those two things specifically moral?
Okay.
They are?
As you keep muting me, now that's the fallacy of a loaded question.
Okay, so I'm going to mute you again, you whiny little bitch. I'm asking specifically, are you saying that it is moral to own another person as property and it is moral to beat them as long as they don't die within a day or so? That's the question. Are those two things moral?
Are you going to stop muting me and allow me to point out?
See, Omar, this is embarrassing for you.
Question.
This is embarrassing for you. You called in.
Absolutely pathetic. I'm muted. No, I'm muted so that you don't talk over me with bullshit. I'm going to unmute you again, and I'm going to ask you the question for the last time. And all I want to start it is whether or not you are saying it is morally permissible to own another person as property and to beat them as long as they don't die within a couple of days. Are you saying that those two things are morally permissible, yes or no?
Loaded questions. You're like fake news.
Omar, thank you. Omar,
honest.
No, wait. Let me talk. Omar, thank you. You have done a great blessing in activism for atheists. Because what you could have done is shown up here and made an honest attempt to reconcile what the Bible does, or acknowledge that the Bible was written by people and flawed, or anything that a decent human being would do. But you didn't do that. All you did was showed up here and tried to justify a type of owning humans, and accused us of throwing a tantrum over slavery being a problem, which, again, I will proudly say that, yes, I'm going to throw a tantrum over slavery, because that's a fucking problem. So again, thank you for your contributions to atheist activism, because you just made Christianity look so fucking disgusting and reprehensible. You probably pushed several people in the audience further towards atheism as a result of your embarrassing attempt to defend slavery. So thank you. I greatly appreciate your work.
It's just wild. It's just absolutely wild. Watch what happens. Watch what they don't say and what they choose to whine about. You're not letting me talk. You muted me. I'm asking you a question. All you ever have to do is answer the question, and then we get to move the conversation forward. You know how this is played before. This ain't your first fucking rodeo, Omar. And I don't believe that Omar is an honest interlocutor at all. I'm not even convinced that Omar's a Christian. I think that there's a good chance that Omar could be an atheist troll trying to make Christians look bad. Because if you truly believe that it is morally permissible to own people as property and to beat them as long as they don't die within a couple days, you have given up your sense of humanity and decency in deference to an idea that is repugnant. You don't have any moral high ground to stand on. And you definitely don't have any moral high ground to be upset that we wouldn't allow you to answer in a diversionary way of it. Oh, this is your fallacy. This is your fallacy. Look, it's not a fallacy to ask a question, you dumbass.
That's what I was just going to say. I was going to say there's no logical fallacy in asking a question. You can accuse us of it being a loaded question, but that's not fallacious.
Yeah, questions are not fallacies. And you could have said, no, I'm not saying those things are moral, but you didn't. You could have been a decent human being to say, I disagree with what the Bible says. I disagree that it should be permissible to own people's property. I think that's something that the ancient Israelites got wrong. I think that that's not in accordance with the mind of God. But instead, you tried to do well, that's not talking about slavery as we think of it nowadays. Yeah, the fuck it's not. There are two different slaveries talked about in Exodus 21. The first are the rules for your Hebrew slaves and when you have to let them go and how you can trick them into being your slaves forever. The rest of the rules apply to Gentile slaves. Why is there a different set of rules for Jewish slaves than there is for Gentile slaves? What kind of God of equality is that? Where, it's because the Jews are God's chosen people. That demonstrates the bias, and it blows away. If you want to point to the Bible as your source of morality, the mere fact that it puts Jews on a different pedestal from everybody else shows that your system is fucking flawed. And it's also flawed because it puts men on one pedestal and women at a sub-tier. It allows for slavery. It allows for misogyny. It allows for genocide. It allows for homophobia. It allows for all kinds of things. And when you call in to suggest that the atheists are the ones that are you're just cherry picking. Hello, if I were God and I was actually opposed to slavery and I actually inspired a book. What?
I said I'd say it. I'd put it in there.
Yes.
He did it. He took the time out to do it for a bunch of other things.
Not only would that be expressly in there, but there would be no passage that anybody could possibly point to that comes anywhere near suggesting that I'm okay with owning people as property. I don't believe Omar is legit or honest.
Yeah, I also, just the notion that there's a takeaway of the Bible and that contradicts owning slaves as an endorsement. The takeaway of any book is completely subjective and arbitrary. Like, you could argue that, when Jesus, that like he was saying, that Jesus said these are the most important commandments and that overrides it. That's one thing. But to say that that's the takeaway of the Bible, I'm willing to bet every single Christian has a different takeaway of the Bible. The notion that there's a uniform takeaway of any book ever is ridiculous.
Yeah, to say that, if you're just going to say, what's the general message of the Bible? Oh, the general message of the Bible is that we're all fallen creatures. We need to talk about whether we're talking about just the Old Testament and New Testament. But if you take the Old and New Testament, the Bible of Christianity, what's the general message of the Bible overall? It is that we are fallen creatures and with a sinful nature and that we are in need of redemption and that God loved us so much that he came down in human form to be both God and fully human, to sacrifice himself to serve as a loophole for rules that he's in charge of in order to provide us with the salvation we don't deserve. That's the takeaway of the whole book. However, when you look at what the Bible actually says, and it allows for slavery, you don't get to say, well, it also says love your neighbors. Okay, cool, it does say that. But what's it mean by neighbors? Because you're not to have communion with the non-believers. You're not supposed to be interacting with me at all. Yeah, I don't believe for a second that Omar was legit. People who call in at this point, anybody who calls into any show that I'm on, who's seen previous discussions that I've had about slavery, who wants to try to argue that the Bible doesn't support slavery, we should just stop taking the call. Josh Bowen has written an entire book. It's literally right here. The Atheist Handbook of the Old Testament. In there, he talks about what the Bible has to say about slavery. I've produced more than one video on slavery. I've debated it multiple times. And if all you're going to do is call in and say, well, yeah, it says that in the Old Testament, but that's not what it means. Now, and what it means is you're supposed to love your neighbor. And if you loved your neighbor, you wouldn't enslave them. Plus,
Says
it's
who?
not like regular slaveries. It's like indentured servitude. Well, Omar, indentured servitude is also immoral.
Yep.
It's bizarre how theists will bend over backwards to try to make excuses for the disgusting things advocated in their books. Hey, we got another theist caller.
Yeah, about that caller, while we bring him on, I have to say, I don't know that I really care to have a theist steelman the argument of an atheist when we ended the call with that atheist on an agreement about the flaws of the argument. Like, I don't really see the purpose of this call at all.
I agree, but Jimmy's calling, prone to he, him, wants to steelman Cam's argument. Considering that we got to Cam's argument was flawed, what's left to steelman, Jimmy?
Well, he did have a misconception there, and you were right to point him out on that. And I think in his premise, what he should have said was that if he's going by the laws of physics and everything's predetermined in that sense, then another caveat he should have added there is that he doesn't account for quantum indeterminacy. He's almost saying that
it's not
there
relevant.
is no.
So first of all, I mentioned that. So pointing out that he's not, are you adding anything substantive I don't even understand why we're remotely rehashing this, but quantum indeterminacy, neither quantum indeterminacy nor randomness is a pathway, a demonstrable pathway to free will. So that's not relevant.
No, no, that's not what I was saying. I was saying that he was arguing for that even the quantum effects are predetermined, that there is no indeterminacy in any sense.
I don't know, Jimmy. I don't know that he was arguing that, or what difference it would make. What's the point? We don't need to rehash his thing.
Okay. Are you familiar with Einstein's notion of the block universe?
Wow. Not well enough to actually talk about it.
Well, Einstein was a hard determinist, and he said God didn't play dice. And he had this notion of the block universe, basically from the Big Bang to, let's say, for the purpose of the discussion. Yeah.
Jimmy, does any of this have anything to do with I don't care what Einstein said. Does any of this have anything to do with demonstrating why we should believe in a God?
Yeah, sure. I think so.
Okay. Like what?
Well, a lot of people who claim, spiritual experience will speak as though let's say that the reason I brought up the block universe is if you consider such a notion, that there is, in a sense, a kind of a background consciousness to the universe itself that we all have the potential to tap into.
No. There's nothing about the block universe model of space-time that suggests there's a consciousness behind it.
This is the implication inside the spiritual or mystical experience.
I don't know what a spiritual or mystical experience is or how anybody can demonstrate that they've had any, but give me an example of a spiritual or mystical experience and how it proves God.
Well, yes, I've heard you say that you've had psychedelics, and why didn't I have a mystical experience? And I would argue that you had a subthreshold dose. When people talk about mystical experiences,
Oh my God, Jimmy, I've been higher than you can fucking imagine. I've been on acid multiple times for 14 fucking hours. I have taken a variety of drugs. How dare you suggest that the reason I don't think I've had a mystical or spiritual experience is because I just didn't dose hard enough? Are you fucking kidding me? I asked, give me an example of a spiritual, mystical experience and how it proves God. And you came at me personally and how much of a dose I've had. You want to try and start over so that you're not engaged in a fallacy and some bullshit about me and are actually talking about what a spiritual / mystical experience is and how it proves God? Because I ain't going to sit here and just have you diss my experience.
Okay. Well, I've heard you give descriptions before, and
Jesus fucking Christ, I'm muting you again. I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to ask you a question. After I ask the question, it should be really simple. Jimmy, does my personal experience with drugs in any way relate to the question, what is a mystical experience and how do you know it's from God?
Okay, I'll answer your question. What it involves is what's called ego death.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
Listen very carefully and answer the question I'm asking right now. Does my personal experience with drugs have anything to do with explaining what a mystical experience is or how you know it's from God? Yes or no?
Well, yes, if you had this phenomenon, for sure.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, no, and Jimmy, I think you must have called in with a different name or on a web link or something, because I know we've talked to you before and we've done this same exact circus thing before, and I'm really not interested in doing it again. So unless you're coming in with a new, different argument that isn't you didn't get high enough, I have no interest.
Well, the point I was trying to make is it's emphasized in psychology as ego death.
No.
That, you know.
Goodbye, Jimmy. Goodbye. You can't answer the question I'm asking, and you couldn't, even after I forced it on you, answer it correctly. What a spiritual experience is not impacted in any way by any experience I've ever had. And whether or not a spiritual experience is proof of a God is not impacted in any way by anything about me. I am completely irrelevant to whether or not there is a spiritual experience and whether or not it's from God. And the fact that you can't fucking figure that out when I tee it up like we're in kindergarten t-ball class with a simple yes or no question disqualifies you from continuing this conversation with me. Goodbye.
Yeah, also, it's frustrating when I point out that this guy has clearly called in before. I heard this exact person make this exact argument. He's calling in on a different web link anonymously and can't just be like, yeah, I did. Some honesty would go so far to help progress the conversation and make me willing to talk to you. But like, you've just got an agenda and I'm not interested in being a party to it.
It's really wild. It's like, I'm just sitting here. All I want to do is get to where we can actually have a discussion. But if you're going to make a case, all I want, is it possible for someone to explain what a spiritual experience is and how they know it's from God without mentioning me or what drugs I've done? Yes. As a matter of fact, throughout the entire history of human beings, anytime they were not talking directly to me, I'm going to say there was a 99.999% chance that their discussion of what a spiritual experience is and how it proves God didn't involve me at all. 99.9% of the time, if they're not talking to me, they didn't mention me. The fact that, well, I've heard you say this before. I'm not arguing that spiritual experiences don't happen because I haven't had one. I've never made that argument. I would never make that argument. That argument is fallacious. I'm saying I don't know what any individual person is describing as a spiritual experience until they explain it. And even then, I generally don't understand, because the language people use to describe spiritual experiences or mystical experiences is so fuzzy that it does not present a cogent concept to me. But let's assume for a second that I agreed that you had something that you are warranted in calling a mystical experience. Now the next step is, how do you show that the mystical experience that you had is because of a God? I'm not relevant to that conversation. Nothing about my life, no matter what drugs I've done, what experiences I've had, whatever experiences I haven't had, none of that's relevant. It's like saying, I am I've got issues, but I'm generally an able-bodied person. I don't know what it's like to not have legs. I can try to empathize with people who have lost their legs, or perhaps people who were born without legs. I can have them describe it to me. I can understand to some extent, because somebody can tell me what their lived experience is, what this feels like, what this is like. Nobody seems to be able to do that with spiritual or mystical stuff. All they want to do is get right past the here's what it is to I'm convinced that it's a God, and you just haven't taken enough drugs.
Yeah, if you just get high enough, then I won't have to explain it to you either.
I've been so high, sitting on a toilet, staring at the back of a wood grain door, that the wood grain on that door manifested into a strawberry with a face and a smile and a cape and an S, a super strawberry that flew off of the door, did laps around my head and smashed back into the door. I've been so high that a little piece of leftover cheese from a pizza, as I stared at it, turned into an MC Escher style salamander, tiled across the pizza box, became fully 3D and color, and walked off of the pizza box. If that's not high enough, what the fuck is high enough?
I've heard, the worst part is I've heard this caller for years, I think, talk to other people and suggest every single time, well, you just didn't get high enough. Well, you just didn't get high enough. Well, you just didn't get high enough. I don't think, Jimmy, that you can get high enough. I think you should keep getting high and stop calling into these shows.
It's wild. We got another theist waiting, and I don't want to make them wait any longer for us to just keep rehashing previous stuff. So Matthew, pronouns are they, them in Australia, has a question about secular humanist ethics. So welcome, Matthew. Thanks for waiting.
Hey there. Thank you so much.
What's up?
My pleasure. How can we help?
Yeah, so I was looking into secular humanist ethics, and I realized it's based on consensual agreement and not objective morality. And I'm just wondering why that is.
Because there may not be any objective foundation for morality, but there's always a ground for consensual agreement.
How can you tell if someone's truly consenting?
So when we are assessing consent, we are looking for the informed, enthusiastic consent of a person who otherwise should be able to reasonably consent. Now, we don't have an easy answer for that in every situation, but we've set boundaries about prior to this age, people can't be considered sufficiently informed to where we're going to take the risk that they're able to consent to this. And in different circumstances, it may be the thing that age isn't the primary factor. But the truth is, you can never truly know someone's mind, so you go with the odds on what is most probable with regard to human knowledge as a whole, how much access they've had to it, and are they making an informed decision? And at some point, you just have to say, well, I may personally doubt whether or not this person's making an informed consensual decision. The rules that we've established, the guidelines that we've decided to go by, mean that we still afford them the right to make this decision, even if it's a mistake.
Okay, well, but do you now appreciate objective morality? Because objective morality is unambiguous.
So,
do we appreciate?
Name something that is objectively morally correct or objectively morally incorrect, and how you know it's objective.
It depends on your belief system, but
no. Go ahead, Arden.
No, Matthew, no. You hold on. You can't tell me that it's objective and that it depends on belief system. Those things are mutually exclusive.
The second one is by definition subjective.
Yeah, if it's objective, it's true all the time, everywhere.
No, not necessarily. It depends on the
yes,
God
necessarily.
You believe in, right?
That's what objective means.
No, hang on. Absolute morality would be true in all circumstances. What Arden's saying is that if something is objectively true, it is not conditioned on somebody's opinion.
Okay. I'm specifically referring to morality from, religious perspective, right? And they label it as their objective.
Matthew, I don't care what you're referring to. You're saying, why not rely on objective morality? And I asked you for an example of something that is objectively moral or objectively immoral, and how you know that it's objectively moral or immoral. Give me an example.
An example of something that is objectively moral. I can't come up with one right now, unfortunately. But
so
the point that I'm making is that if
no, we have to point this out, Matthew. We have to clip this, because how can you say that? Why not rely on objective morality when you literally can't even think of something that is objectively moral? Doesn't that not demonstrate that there is, not in and of itself, admittedly, but is it not a problem for you that you can't even think of something that's objectively moral?
No, it's based on your religious, perspective.
Matthew, that's not objective, though. If it's based on someone's religion, that's not objective.
It's objective to them. They believe it's
no. There's no objective to them. Objective to them is nonsensical.
They believe it's objective.
No.
I don't care
whether
what they
or not
believe.
Somebody believes that's objective doesn't make it objective. That's a fallacy.
But that's not the point that I'm making. I'm not saying it's objective.
You're not making a point, Matthew. You're not making a sensible point at all.
I just did. I said it's objective to
sir.
them.
No, Matthew. It is not something. The very sentence, "it is objective to them," is absurdly stupid beyond measure. Objective to them. If it's to them, it is subjective by definition, not objective.
Look, I will lower the standards, right? Let's just say there's
I don't need you. No, stop. Okay, I'm going to mute you. Stop. Nobody's asking you to lower the standards. You don't have any standards. You don't have any comprehension or understanding of this. You're asking questions about something that you've clearly not spent any time thinking about. Or when I asked you, you're like, hey, why wouldn't you lie on objective standards? And I'm like, because I'm unaware of any objective standards. Are you aware of any? And you're like, no, but it's objective to the person who thinks it's objective. No, it's fucking not. Something isn't objective merely because somebody thinks it's so. So if you and I are in agreement, Matthew, that we cannot point to any objective standard, in the absence of an objective standard, what's wrong with using consensual agreement as a standard?
Sorry, I made the mistake. Let me rephrase my question.
No. Answer my question.
Sorry, what was your question? There was a beep in between.
If you and I are in agreement that there is no objective moral thing that we can point to, why wouldn't relying on consensual agreement be preferred?
Maybe objective morality was the wrong phrase.
I didn't, Matthew, goodbye.
Wow.
What do you mean, wow? You're laughing. You have completely wasted my time.
Yeah, you failed
and
to
my
demonstrate
audience's
anything.
time and Arden's time, and we pointed out how you're being sloppy with the language you use, and I ask you to answer my question, and now you just want to say, well, maybe that was the wrong term. Maybe I just need a different term. What the fuck is your question? Because it says here that your question is, why are secular humanist ethics based on consensual agreement and not objective morality? And I said, because we are unable to identify an objective morality, and consensual agreement seems like a really good foundation for that. Are you going to give some better foundation? No, you hung up and ran away.
Oh, did they run away?
Yep.
Yeah. I also want to point
I
out
didn't hang up on them.
To the audience that Matt's yes, sir. Also, I was editing a clip from a couple months ago where Matt did that to a woman, a cis woman with she, her pronouns. So it's maybe a problem that Matt does that in general, but it's just a bad habit. But to the people in chat, there are pronouns on the fucking screen, and if you misgender our callers, you're gonna get muted and possibly banned in chat. So how about you just respect people's pronouns? It's really not that hard. Even if they're annoying and completely off base with their arguments, you still need to gender them correctly in our chat if you want to be welcome in chat.
Yes, sir, is a habit that I have, which somebody pointed out I use even when nobody's here. It's not an attempt to misgender someone. I'm not even sure which honorific, what honorific would be preferred, because that's not a pronoun.
Yeah, I generally think it's just kind of considered just don't even go there, because there's really no equivalent in the English language, at least.
Yeah, it's probably just a bad habit on my part that I'm going to have to work on correcting, but it is, yeah. And I get it. If somebody's non-binary, it wouldn't matter whether I said no, sir, or no, ma'am. Those would both be incorrect. I acknowledge that. I just don't know. Maybe in addition to asking for pronouns, we could ask for their preferred honorific. And then I could say, no, Lord Zeus, because that's exactly what they're going to start saying.
Yeah.
But
all right, we've got one more caller on the line for today. I have closed the lines because we are almost at 5 o'clock.
Yep. And I know there's some kind of gamey type thing going on. But Teresa, who's been waiting patiently for all this time, welcome to the show, and thank you for your patience.
No problem. Hi, Matt. Hi, Arden.
Hey.
Hey, we talked a few days ago.
Awesome.
So I'm having a hard time. I'm not sure how to deal with this as an atheist. I've been an atheist almost all my life. My partner of 24 years died about 2 years ago. I've known this since I was a little kid. Every day I wake up crying and sad and just so alone. And I've had friends and family who, granted, they're not pushy, but like, oh, well, and they offer like religious answers. And I know those answers are bullshit, but I don't know how to come to terms with the fact that I'm not going to see her again.
So, first of all,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I always recommend, I don't know if the organization is still live. I know the Facebook group has posts as recently as February 5th. So I would recommend reaching out to an organization that at least exists on Facebook called Grief Beyond Belief. There's also the Secular Therapy Project. Both of those can perhaps point you to people who are going to have better help than we are at how to deal with grief and respond to this stuff. It is, I mean, I've had people in my life die, but usually like, grandparents or somebody who lived a long life. I haven't lost like a partner or sibling. I know if I were to lose Brad or Arden, I don't even know how I would cope. I would be absolutely distraught. But I don't know.
It's hard.
I don't know. I don't think that I have any useful advice beyond reaching out to an organization like Grief Beyond Belief and the Secular Therapy Project to get more expert help than what I could offer here.
Yeah, I mean,
What?
No, go ahead, Teresa.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go, Teresa.
No, that's okay. Oh, okay. Is there any way to? So usually I'm kind of a firebrand and I'll say what's on my mind and take it as it is. But I don't know how to tell these people that when they do that kind of thing, it crushes me inside every single time. And honestly, I don't think they really care in a way. Because if they cared, they would probably stop it. Because I would tell them, "Hey, I don't want to talk about that."
Well,
and then
when you say
next time something like this happens,
I agree that I would think that if they cared, they wouldn't say things like that. I also think that I don't want to be like, I'm not trying to like a victim blame here, right? But I do think you have to some degree advocate for yourself and like lay down the boundary of like, hey, I'm not okay with when you say things like this. It really hurts my feelings. And if you continue to do that, even after I've laid down this boundary, that's going to be a problem for us in having a relationship moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah. I promise I'm not in any way trying to make light of the situation you're in, but when somebody says, I don't know how to tell them this, my question, no matter how naive it is what's wrong with telling them exactly what you just told me?
Yep.
To say that I don't know if you care, but this really hurts me when you do this.
Usually I do, and usually I just figure out to say whatever and let it be what it is. But with this, it's so sensitive and so raw because, this person, she's helped save my life several times, She's closer to me than anybody on the planet. And I have a really, even now, just over 2 years out, I still have a really hard time, enjoying things or getting up and doing anything. And I worry that this is going to be the rest of my life. And I don't know how to get past this.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to ask an obvious question, but Teresa, are you in therapy?
I wasn't until I moved, so
that's fair. I acknowledge.
Don't know.
There's financial boundaries to getting access to a therapist, and things like moving make it difficult for sure. I definitely, if you are having a hard time enjoying life, I'll say that is a symptom of something bigger than just grief. And while grief can certainly be a trigger to it, for most people, I think it's eventually that aspect fades. And if it's not fading for you, I think there's maybe something bigger going on here. And a therapist or a professional would be probably better suited to help you on that issue, which is maybe where we can push you towards the Secular Therapy Project or Freedom from Religion. Is that the one? I always get the two mixed up. Recovering from Religion, maybe.
Recovering from Religion.
Yeah.
Recovering from Religion.org. That I will say, I have zero expertise, and this is not judgment or anything else. I would think that over time, the loss should get a little more bearable. And so when I hear that it's been a couple of years and you are still despondent and don't seem to have much in the way of a mechanism to kind of deal with the grief, I'd highly recommend getting hold of the Secular Therapy Project, because hopefully somebody can give you a tool set that can make this more bearable. And that's, I know there's not any right way that I know of or any right time frame to grieve. We know that, for example, when two people have been partnered for a long time, when one of them dies, especially you see June Carter Cash die, you can pretty much predict that Johnny Cash is going to die not long after. The same thing probably with Jimmy Carter, his wife, things like that. You see things like that happen. And the human mind and our psychology is incredibly powerful. And when you are dealing with things that take away your will to live a better life or to continue on in the absence of someone that you're close to, that's exactly what reaching out for therapy is all about. And I know that there are some, if there's financial issues and other things, I know that there are some facilities that can work around that or find a way to make it happen.
Well, so I talked to my therapist because she knew, I was with her maybe a year into, this happening. And she pretty much said the same thing as, it just takes time. But, I don't know. I don't know how to explain
she's not wrong, right? Grief, like Matt's saying, grief affects everyone on a different timeline. And I'm not suggesting that, it's been 2 years and now you actually have clinical depression and you need to go. I'm not diagnosing you with anything. I'm just saying that, in my view, not enjoying things that used to bring you joy, I think it's called anhedonia, is a literal symptom of depression. And that is, so while I'm not diagnosing you with depression, I'm saying I do think that seems to be indicative of something bigger than just grief. And
no, I do have depression. I've for a long time been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, so there is that.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a very fair assessment.
I mean, and that might be why it's become so difficult for you to grieve, and you know, not that you ever really move on from losing a loved one in that way, but you know, to cope with your loss. Yeah, I really think you just need to maybe be gentle with yourself and understand that, you know, I would definitely advise trying to get on top of getting a new therapist. I think that's going to help a lot. And don't be afraid to shop around for therapists either. I know, again, it can be prohibitively expensive, but I do think you're generally going to find much better results at coping with things like this when you are actually putting your therapist through the ringer. Don't just accept who you get. If you are able to, try to get a consult with like 2 or 3 and ask them questions about their style, how they solve issues. Do they give you like homework and solutions and strategies, or are they more of a ask you questions so you solve it kind of approach? Really interrogate their procedure and think for yourself about what you think would be the most helpful for you. I think those kinds of things can really help you to have the most beneficial relationship with a therapist.
Well, I'm lucky. I'm lucky in the fact that I live in a state in America where therapy is covered pretty well.
That's great.
You know, and I mean, I know I'm fortunate in that way. I'm well aware of it.
Yeah.
I wish there was a way that didn't seem religious, because to me, religion is horrible, it's disgusting. But it seems like I know the religious thing is like nice and flowery, but it's not realistic, you know. But at the same time, I struggle with, oh well, maybe I would see her, but then my very next thought is, oh, if there's a God, I'm taking him out. So you know, it just leads me back to just being angry and despondent and upset. And I wish I could just get past all of that and get on with life and be able to enjoy things again. You know, I take moment by moment as it is, and that's all that works. But I can't stay that way. I've been like that for 2 years. I can't stay that way.
I have a lot of mixed feelings, but I don't think there's any right or wrong way to approach life in this notion. So I really think it's a matter of you're feeling distressed. You're feeling like you can't move on. You're feeling unsatisfied and frustrated with like other relationships and how this loss has affected those. And really, ultimately, I think it sounds like a therapist and maybe even, you know, whatever treatment that they endorse would be the best course of action for you. Because definitely, if you are, you know, when we're talking about like psychology and diagnostic things, right? You could have like all of the symptoms of a certain disorder, but if it's not inhibiting your ability to like live life and have relationships and do the things you like, it's not much of a disorder at that point, right? And it sounds like these things are, however mild, really, or even no, not mild, not saying they are mild, but however you perceive them, it sounds like they're prohibiting your ability to interface with the world and to do things, and that matters. So, you know, I have other thoughts about whether or not you can or shouldn't live in the moment day by day, but it's kind of irrelevant. And those are just my feelings, my opinion, you know. And I think all you really need is to know that other people have been through the things you've been through, and you know, we're deeply empathizing with how difficult it must be for you, and that I really hope you're able to get the right care soon.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And Matt, you said it was called the secular what? I apologize.
Seculartherapy.org and recoveringfromreligion.org.
Does recovering from religion deal with grief in a I know it does in a non-religious setting, but doesn't it just deal with religious stuff?
Sure. But so there's seculartherapy.org and recoveringfromreligion.org. They were both started by Dr. Darrell Ray. So there's an actual chat service there at recoveringfromreligion.org that can direct you to secular therapy, which is why I gave both of them. The Facebook group, which may have a website, is called Grief Beyond Belief. which was started, I don't know, 14, 15 years ago, to specifically help people who are dealing with grief from a non-religious standpoint.
Okay, I remember, cause I've watched you for a long time. My partner and I both did, and I do remember around the time you started, promoting them. So never thought I'd actually need them, but here I am.
Yeah, and I'm very sorry that you do, but I'm thrilled that they exist because you do and because other people do. And thank you for calling, because it gives us an opportunity to, address the grief issue, which we don't always get to address every week. So
yeah,
we wish you the best, and I hope that the period of time that it takes you to find some acceptable sense of normalcy is really quick. It probably won't be, but I still hope for the best.
Thank you both. Thank all of you guys. I've watched and paid attention to you, Matt, since way back on the Atheist Experience. So you do a lot of good work.
I don't know what
you
that
do
is.
too, Arden.
Thank you, Teresa.
Fair enough.
I'm
Fair
kidding.
enough.
I'm kidding.
No, you and I had a quick talk before, and I was like, oh, okay. So.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Teresa.
But yes, thank you both so much. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Cheers.
Thanks.
No, that was it. We'll see you later.
Bye, Teresa.
See ya. Bye.
Alrighty.
That was a joke, because I don't know if they're live today or not, because there's a Super Bowl, so who knows? I suppose I can now turn people loose to get ready to watch a superb owl, to watch Taylor's boyfriend go just completely demolish those San Francisco 49ers and stuff like that.
I've actually had a principled, not really principled, this weird thing where, because everyone's so obsessed with the Super Bowl, and even people who don't like sports watch the Super Bowl, and I don't like sports. I really just do not enjoy almost any part of it. I've always had this thing where I've been like, I will not watch the Super Bowl. I won't even watch the commercials. I don't want to be a part of it. But because Taylor is making everyone's panties bunch up so much this year, I might just watch for Taylor. I might.
We might give it a little bit of a view. Anyway, that is the full episode of the Sunday show. First of all, a huge thank you to Arden, who was not supposed to be on today and was not supposed to be producing today. But unfortunately, Jimmy was under the weather, and it was, Arden jumped in immediately to be ready to produce. And when there wasn't another option, I always love doing shows with you. So
it was fun. I'm always a little nervous just because I'm not super philosophically like I said, I've taken philosophy courses in school. I can kind of follow the ideas for sure, but I'm not always up on the jargon. I can't always articulate myself as well as maybe some others can. So I like to leave it to the people who I think are going to be stronger. But it is fun. I do like talking about religion and atheism because I don't get to do that as much anymore. Most of my jam is all on the trans rights stuff. So it's fun to take a break from that and to talk to some callers about religion.
Speaking of people who don't get a chance to do that very often, but who will, who's going to be, let's see, who are my upcoming guests on the Hang Up? And then we should mention guests on the Sunday show.
Yeah, so we'll just go through next week's shows. Tomorrow on Skeptalk is going to be Aron and Lalandra. That's 6 p.m. Central Time. There was going to be a Tuesday show. I think it's moved till next week. Wednesday is going to be you and John Gleason on the Hang Up, so that'll be good. Godless Engineer, hosts Skeptalk all the time. You guys know him and love him. It's going to be great. It's going to be Katy and I on TACIS again on Thursday, and then next Sunday, I think, is going to be Katy as your guest on the Sunday show. So you'll get another TACIS trans activist who's probably not going to also want to talk about trans issues much, except Katy has a way higher tolerance for that than I do. I came in today and I was like, I just want to talk about religion. Let's focus on religion. Katy's probably going to say whatever, so.
And that's the extent of that. And while Arden is getting ready to queue up the end of the show, let me remind everybody that you can go to QANAline.com and apply to be on NBOSS there. We have the first episode of NBOSS is coming up first weekend in March. You can also go to linemerch.com where you can get your gay homie shirt and and some dishwasher safe coffee cups, coffee mugs, and all that stuff. I don't follow football all that much. I used to kind of maybe care a little bit. Like I said, I'm from Kansas City, so I was raised a Chiefs fan. The preposterousness of having a favorite football team has really settled in with me. The notion of being proud of a team that's from your hometown when none of them are from your hometown seems kind of weird, or very few of them are there. That just happens to be where, big NFL decided to place them and other stuff. But I do appreciate the fact that there are people who care more about it and that it's a big deal. And so we appreciate anybody who, in the pregame sense, who has showed up to call in, to interact, to show up on here. At the end of the day, though, there's an event getting ready to take place. I'm going to go maybe watch just a little bit of it, maybe pay a little bit of attention. But there are other events that we absolutely have to pay attention to. When people call in and say things like, why do you care about whether or not somebody else believes in a God? I care because their beliefs inform their actions. Their actions have consequences on the rest of us, because we're all stuck on this little rock in space where we're not apparently doing enough with regard to climate change, where there are elections, where there are courts, where how people vote and what they think impacts everybody else's life. That's important. So whereas the superb owl or Super Bowl may not be that important to most of us, if it's something you enjoy, absolutely go enjoy it. And if there's something else that you enjoy other than a sporting event, absolutely go enjoy that. The one thing that I've learned, there's probably many things I've learned over the years, but one thing that's important when you do as many shows and as much voluntary activism as I've done over the years, people will be like, gosh, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn out. You're going to burn out. And for whatever reason, I don't. But I think one of the reasons that I don't is because I'm really good at making me time. Once I'm done with the shows and have replayed it in my head, Arden and I will go downstairs, we'll have dinner, we'll watch something fun, we'll play with our snakes, we'll, check out shopping for other reptiles and stuff like that. And it's just that sort of thing that you enjoy. Enjoy gets you joy. And you're going to need a buildup of joy, because I promise you, there's going to be unbelievable shit happening in the next year or so that is going to be traumatic and frustrating and demoralizing for all of us. Democracy is not in good shape. We've got a lot of work to do as we head towards the elections, and we also still can't get complacent about religious privilege in the world. So go get yourself some joy. Get your bucket full of joy as best you can. And that way, when people are flinging poo, you can dribble a little joy on you and not worry as much about the catastrophic things that could be coming down the pipe. That's it for this week. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate you all. Thanks to our mods, our call screeners.
Thanks, Dragon, for call screening. Didn't give Dragon a shout out. Forgot Dragon. Thank you, Dragon. You're amazing. Good calls today.
Look,
you want to get your name on that patron producers list? You can go to patreon.com/calltheline, support us, and get a special little shout out at the end of every episode, just like this, so that you can cut us off.
Absolutely hates us. The best thing you could do is become a producer at that level, so I have to look at your name every time we do a show.
That's right.
patreon.com/Q&A Live.